Welcome in, everyone. Hello, guys. We are about to get started for our guest live. Please, if you're just coming in, like, share the live, join the team. So click on the orange heart, please. And we'll get started soon. Welcome in, welcome in. Please make sure to share out the live. Hello, everyone. Hello. Our guest live event is about to start soon. So please make sure you guys share it out, get everyone here to listen. And this is going to be a very, very important live. Salam Rana, salam Linda, Rima, everyone that's coming in. Please share it on any discords, as well as to your friends. This is a very important live. Let me fix my mods because I always have to fix the mod settings so that way we are not muting anything. So my mods, if you're here, please do not mute, block, just anything that's extremely, extremely vile from the opposite side. But other than that, we should be okay. So again, guys, please share out the live if you're just coming in. And we'll get started soon. Hope everybody is doing well. Salam. Tahir Rima Azaman. Guys, please share it out. Share it out. I'm gonna share it out right now. And we'll get started soon. If any of my mods want to come up, salam. Guys, inshallah, since everybody is here, we have another awesome live coming up next week. So stay tuned for that. Definitely excited for that as well. That'll be a very different type of live, but it'll be a good one, inshallah. So appreciate you guys all for being here. Oh, let me see. It's a
Assalamu
glitchy.
alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Hello.
How are
All
you?
right. Good, good. How are you? Guys, let's share out
Alhamdulillah.
the live.
Yeah,
Our
let's
guest is
go ahead.
here, so we want to give it just a few more minutes, and then we want to get as many people in the room as possible. Go ahead, Linda.
I was just gonna say, let's get the likes up to 20K, guys. Let's share it out to 1,000. Chat, keep it flowing with positive comments. If we can start a subwave, that would be great. That would bring more people in. If you
Mm-hmm.
long hold the host screen, you can share it out to about 60 people, I believe.
Yes, yes, everyone, please, please share it out. Really excited for today's conversation, inshallah. It'll be like very educational. I'm actually like very excited to have everybody listen to what we're about to hear today. So please keep sharing it out and we'll get started in just a few minutes. Oh, and I just wanted to say, whoever has any questions, feel free to, request to come up. Thank you, Michelle, for the sub. Please request to come up. We will have a Q&A session. So we will have that available at the end. So for anyone who does have any questions, please make sure to save that towards the end so that way you guys can come up to the panel. Oh wait, do you want to ask a question? I don't know if you guys are just coming in to boost the live.
I was requesting to boost. I was just about to write a
Oh, okay.
comment. Don't ride me. I'm just gonna stay in the request and boost.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Celine, W. Celine.
W.
Ronnie, same thing. Let me see, Ronnie. Salam, Linda.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Are you
Beautiful.
requesting to boost?
I I was. I don't know if I have any questions right now. I was gonna tell you to change the live rule because I don't know if anybody has access to that gift. I know I don't, which is weird.
Oh, you don't? Okay, thank you
No,
for letting me know.
so I'll
Let
give you a heads up
me.
just in
Oh
case.
my God, J1 with the
WJ1 with the
subs.
subs.
WJ1. Yes, guys, please make sure to protect the live. Obviously, as you guys know, there will be no nothing is filtered here. Everything will, there's no TikTok language or whatever it is. So please, please just protect the live in any way possible. Thank you, J1 with the subs.
We
All
have a
right,
sub
guys,
wave
keep.
going, Taz. I believe we need 3 more subs.
Yeah, we'll give it another few minutes and then we'll get started. Hello, Ronnie.
Hello. 2 subs. I gotta lose weight. Oh my god, I look so fat. We need 2 subs, guys.
WAJQ.
WAJQ. No,
All right,
AJQ,
guys,
we'll
we
let you
almost
know.
have
I'm
a
gonna drop
100
me, drop me,
people
drop
here.
me. Don't send me
WA
any gifts.
Money. All right, guys, keep sharing out the live. And we will get started here in just a bit. WDD with the subs. Amazing, amazing. All right, we'll give it just a few minutes and we'll get started.
I'm gonna drop. I just want to remind everybody to please share out the live. Keep tapping, keep it positive, guys. And if we post a survey up, just engage with it to protect the live. Thank you. I'm gonna drop,
Thank
Taz.
you. Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Yo, Allah, Allah, la, la, with the sub. W, everyone. You guys are all amazing. Inshallah, we'll get started here very, very soon. Very excited. Our guest is here, so we just want to kind of boost the live, get as many people in here as possible, and we will go ahead and get started. Again, this is a very informational live. We have former AIPAC, ex-AIPAC member who's now an advocate for Palestinian rights that will be joining us to speak about the Jewish identity and how it is intertwined with Israel. So please, WAJQ. So please make sure you guys share this out. Very informational live, and we will get started. All right, let me bring up our guest. Again, if you do have, thank you, Blake, with the sub. If you guys do have any questions, please request to come up and we will go from there. So let me just make sure our guest is able to come up. Nisa. All right. Let's get this here.
Can you hear me and see me?
I don't see you. Let me, I just sent you a request. If you press accept and save, I think we will be able to see you. There we go. Perfect. We
Okay.
see you.
All right.
All right. Again, please let me know if you are interested in coming up and asking a question. Please put it in the chat. I don't know if you are boosting or not, so please let me know. I know some people already let me know that they wanted to join in, but if you want to come up, just let me know in the chat, inshallah. All right. Okay, we have 130 plus people here, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. All right, let me go ahead and rise. Today we have Richard Forer. He is a former member of AIPAC, American Israel Public Affairs Committee, with Orthodox relatives living in settlements in the West Bank. Richard has been to the West Bank a few times, as well as to the Gaza Strip in November of 2012. For his entire life, he supported Israeli policy, believing the Jewish state an innocent nation eager to make peace with its neighbors. Everything changed in 2006 when he underwent a spiritual awakening in which he recognized his common humanity with all people. Profoundly affected by this new reality and wanting to share his newfound wisdom with others, he devoted himself to years of intense daily research, culminating in breakthrough. Transforming Fear into Compassion, a new perspective on the Israel-Palestine conflict, and the New York City Big Book award-winning Wake Up and Reclaim Your Humanity, Essays on the Tragedy of Israel-Palestine. Thank you, Richard, for being with us today. I wanted to first start off by wishing you a very, very happy birthday.
Well, thank
Please,
you.
everyone, if you can fill the chat with happy birthday, if we can get some white hearts, anything to just wish him a happy birthday. He is spending his birthday with us today. So again, happy birthday, Richard.
Thank you,
In
Taz.
Arabic, we say عقبال الميت سنة, which is, hopefully many more, up to 100 years. But please, we'll go ahead and get started. It's an honor to have you with us. I know there's a few others that didn't want to come up. Backer, if you wanted to come up, please request. I see you in the chat. So I wanted to first go ahead and start off. If you could tell us about your profound personal transformation, going from growing up in a traditional Jewish family to advocating for Palestinian rights.
Yes, okay. Well, I do explain this in great detail in my books, but let's start off. I was brought up in Trenton, New Jersey, which is between Philly and New York, and there was a large Jewish population. During the summers, from the time I was 3 or 4 years old, I attended camp or nursery school at the Jewish Community Center. I attended synagogue Friday nights, Saturday and Sunday, Saturday school and Sunday school until I was 14. And I probably had more of I probably identified more with being Jewish than most of my friends, although we all did. But I was, I guess, particularly sensitive. So, for example, when I was probably 6 or 7 years old, I was the first kid in the school in my group to learn how to say the Jewish the Hebrew prayers, Hamotzi Lechem in Haaretz, the brochas, and I got a for the prayer over wine. I got a beautiful little silver chalice that I really treasured, and that kind of brought me more into my Jewish identity. And also throughout school, I went to public school, and remember, I graduated sixth grade in 1960, and it wasn't until 1960 that the Supreme Court outlawed school prayer and religious demonstrations. So in our classes, probably from kindergarten up through sixth grade, they always celebrated Easter and Christmas, and they never celebrated Passover or Hanukkah. And I took that as a personal slight. Okay, even though probably I would say less than 10% of my class was Jewish, of the school was Jewish. And that, again, because I felt slighted, because I felt like my identity was being dismissed or ignored, that made me even more loyal to my identity, more attached to my identity. So then, I grew up, I got bar mitzvah, I grew up and all this, and I was always sensitive to criticism of Israel all my life. And I'll skip to 2006. On July 12th, 2006, as some people may remember, Hezbollah conducted a cross-border raid into northern Israel. And I think they killed 2 Israeli soldiers and captured 3. And the next day, Israel retaliated. And that began the Second Lebanon War. And Israel's retaliation was very powerful, as usual. And over the course of the next 3 weeks, they displaced over 1 million people, killed over 1,000 people. And when what happened was when Hamas conducted this cross-border raid, I was horrified. And I was particularly horrified because 3 weeks earlier, Hamas had captured Gilad Shalit, the Israeli soldier, on the Israel-Gaza border. And so the combination of events happening just within 3 weeks of each other convinced me, reinforced my paranoia that the Arab world would.
Oh, I think he may have gotten a call.
Until Israel was wiped from the face of the earth. And I was very upset. I supported Israel's invasion of Lebanon. I supported what they were doing in Lebanon, which was rather drastic, as it usually is with Israel. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to talk to 2 of my friends, 2 of my closest, wisest friends, neither of whom are Jewish, both of whom had always been critical of Israel, though we never had any long discussions particularly about Israel, except one time, which happened within days of Hezbollah's attack. Anyway, I went to them thinking, okay, they've always been critical of Israel, but this time they've got to agree with me. After what Hamas did, and then after Hezbollah followed Hamas 3 weeks later, they've got to realize now that Israel is an innocent nation fighting for its life against a psychotic people who want to destroy the Jews and push them into the sea. So I spoke to each of these friends individually, and both of them told me that Israel was using disproportionate force against the people of Lebanon and that they did not agree with me. And I was aghast. I was horrified. I had expected they would finally agree with me. So I was really demoralized. I went home, and after each discussion, I kind of contemplated or went over the discussion in my mind, trying to see, was there something they said that I missed? Was there something they said I didn't understand? And after contemplating these discussions, I realized, no, I understood everything they said. I didn't miss anything. Maybe these two friends of mine, two of the most open-minded, wisest people in the world, maybe they're also anti-Semitic. Maybe and you know what? The non-Jewish world just can't understand the suffering of my people. So then what happened was, I'll go through this quick. I got a phone call from an old Jewish friend I'd known all my life, who rarely calls, once every 10 years. And he told me he was going to come out west and that he was planning to visit me. And I knew that he had studied the subject of Israel-Palestine for years, but he was not very vocal about it. He was very low-key. So I said, okay, that's great. I'm glad you're coming to visit. And by the way, the Arab world wants to kill all the Jews. And I went on for at least 2 hours on this diatribe, and he just listened. And he barely interrupted, only once in a while to correct me on a minor historical fact. And then at the end of my diatribe, he goes, why don't you read some books by Jewish Israeli professors that are well respected? And I didn't know of any. And he goes, and he gave me two names, Baruch Kimmerling and Tanya Reinhardt. And suddenly it occurred to me, now, one of the things I got to point out is that my friend Sam never resisted what I was saying. He allowed me to say what I was saying, even though he may not have agreed with me. He's very non-committal. But even though he didn't really agree with everything I was saying, he allowed me to say it. He didn't resist. He didn't fight back. He didn't...
Oh, oh, wait, hold on. Oh, now we can hear you.
So what happened was, I realized after he told me to read books, to look up Kimmerling and Reinhardt, I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe there's something I don't know about this subject. And that's a rather amazing thing to say, or even considering that I didn't know anything about the subject. Really, all I knew was what I had been brought up to believe, the stories of Israel's enemies that are in the Torah and the Bible, and I had never studied the subject at all, and yet I assumed I knew everything there was to know. So after this realization, well, maybe there's something I don't know, I looked up books by Kimmerling and Reinhardt on Amazon. And when I did that, other books came up on the subject of Israel-Palestine. And I started writing down the names of books with the stipulation that I was only going to read a book by a Jewish author. I would not trust a goy to speak honestly about Israel.
Mm.
So I then went to my library and I checked out a couple books that were on my list. And I didn't know who any of these authors were, although I saw that they had great credentials, let's say that. So I got home, and within a few days I was reading, I first read one book by Kimmerling. It didn't really do much for me. It was a kind of a history of the Palestinian people. Then I started reading another book, and which was very critical of Israel, extremely critical, and it did not criticize the Palestinians at all. And I'm thinking, well, maybe this guy, this Jewish professor, maybe he's an anti-Semite or a self-hating Jew. But I couldn't assume that because I knew he was brilliant. I knew right away when I started reading the book that this was a brilliant person. And everything he said, every criticism he made against Israel, he backed up. He had he was quoting from B'Tselem, the Israeli Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, mainstream human rights organizations. And he was citing his source material. So I would read something by him where he quotes the Human Rights Watch, for example, criticizing Israel for its use of indiscriminate lethal force, even in situations where there's only unarmed civilians, mostly women and children. Or the collective punishment of Palestinians, the destruction of houses, sometimes with people still inside. And I was reading these horrible things, but while I was doing it, I was checking his sources. So since he was very meticulous about his citations, I would go online and find the reports from Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International and B'Tselem that he was citing. And I was hoping to find him taking information out of context and changing a word here or there from what those human rights organizations were saying in order to paint Israel in a negative light. But what I discovered was that everything he was quoting was accurate, 100% accurate, and that he was meticulous. Not only meticulous, it was obvious that he was not really injecting his own opinion. It was based on what he discovered. So at a certain point, and while this was going on, and this went on for a couple of days actually, but while this was going on, at a certain point, I had to take a break from what I was reading. And when I was reading this material, I was not resisting any of the feelings or emotions that were arising within me. But because I was so absorbed in the material, I simply let these emotions arise without any resistance. So for example, I'm reading about the horrible things Israel does to the Palestinians, and that my first reaction was shock. I never knew that. Jews would never do that to another people. And then the shock turned to anger that Israel was doing these abominations in my name as a Jew. Israel speaks for the Jewish people, according to Israel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the anger towards Israel turned into anger towards myself for being so deluded and such a dupe for this propaganda for all my life. And then the anger towards myself turned into shame for my dismissal of the suffering of an entire people and for my blind acceptance of a particular position simply because I was born into the same tribe that the position comes from. And then embarrassment arose, and then sorrow for the suffering of the Palestinian people. And I realized these people were suffering profoundly from my ignorance. Israel could not be doing these crimes without my participation, without my moral support, and the moral support of others just like me, who believed the propaganda, who were conditioned to believe what we believed, that Israel was always an innocent nation, always at war with its enemies who wanted to throw all the Jews into the sea. So I put the book down and I took a break. And I don't know how long my eyes were closed, but when I opened them, I felt cleansed. I felt totally free and blissful. And I looked around the room and I noticed that I couldn't believe that these emotions were all gone. The absence of emotion was so startling that I began looking for the emotions in my room. I was looking in the corners of my walls. I was looking in my bookcase. Where's the anger? Where's the shame? Where's the embarrassment? And I couldn't find anything. And so I just sat back and relaxed into my newfound state of freedom and wonderment. And I had nothing to do and nowhere to go. I had no agenda. And I just sat and relaxed. And then at a certain point, I felt this wonderful warmth throughout my body. And it was so blissful, and I felt peaceful. And I looked out at the world, and the world looked brighter. And I realized that peace has to be found within before it can be found without, because the world and we are interactive. The world is a psychophysical relationship with me. Okay, it's not an object separate from me. And I saw that I'll see peace, and I realized I will see peace in the world when I see it within myself. And the world was brighter. Okay, at this point, the world was brighter. I actually had a beam of light that I saw with my inner eyes. It was like if I closed my eyes, I would see this beam of light coming from my I can't remember if it was my heart or just below the belly button, but it was going off into infinity, like I was connected to the world. And then what happened was I felt this cloth, a cloth-like feeling. My eyes were covered, but what felt like a soft cloth with a little bit of pressure over my eyes, and it felt very nice. And as I'm basking in this wonderful feeling, the cloth began to unravel from left to right in a spiral motion. And as it did, when it did, I realized that what can I say? I realized that I was not just a Jew. Okay. And I started inquiring into my Jewish identity. And what I did was I decided I can't find a Jewish identity. I can't find any identity, any separate identity, any individual identity that is separate from anything else. I cannot find that. And what I did was I decided, let me test myself. So I imagined myself in the place of Nick Berg. For those of you who remember, in 2003, he was the young Jewish man, I think he was in his early 20s, who worked in Iraq. And he was captured by, I guess it was Al-Qaeda of Iraq, and he was beheaded on camera, okay? And that horrified me. It always horrified me whenever I heard about atrocities, especially against Jews in the Middle East. And he was Jewish, and I identified with him. In fact, I could so easily identify with Jewish soldiers. So when I read for example, going back to the start of the first Lebanon war, when Hezbollah conducted their raid, the killing of the soldiers or the capture of Gilad Shalit, I took it personally. They wanted to do the same thing to me because I was just like them. I was a Jew. That's how strongly I identified with being Jewish. Anyway, so at this point, I'm trying to renew the horrifying feelings, the fear and the terror and the anger that would arise whenever I would hear about these atrocities done against people in the Middle East, especially against Jews. And I could not resurrect any negative feelings. Instead, what arose was the recognition that despite their hatred and cruelty, even the most bloodthirsty of terrorists crave the same right to self-determination as do I. And when I realized that, I suddenly noticed, and I don't know how I noticed this, but this was a profound spiritual experience. I realized that I had just reclaimed my humanity. That not only had I reclaimed my humanity, I was able to acknowledge that I had lost my humanity in my treatment and attitude towards Palestinians most of my life. Okay? And there were a lot of people much worse than me, believe me. But when I recognized that I had lost my humanity and now had reclaimed it, it was the most wonderful moment of my life by far. It was the greatest relief ever. And then I continued inquiring, and I could not find a Jewish identity. And then I started feeling that I realized that this blissful state I was in, I felt like I had awakened from a dream. There was no dilemma in my mind. There was no conflict. There was no problem. There was no conceptual or dualistic thinking. I was just free. I was totally free, and everything was simple and ordinary, and there was no dilemma or conflict with anything. And I felt like I had really wakened from a dream. And I actually pinched myself to make sure maybe I am dreaming. This was so amazing. And then I realized that this condition is our natural condition. It is what I would call, and some spiritual masters have called, the prior condition that is always already the case, that is the true nature of all human beings. And that we layer onto this all these beliefs and images that and identification with one thing or another, whether we're identified with as being a Jew, an American, a victim, a perpetrator. Whatever we identify with becomes part of our identity, part of our precious identity. And then I discovered all these insights arose, not because I was thinking, it was because I was not thinking. And all these insights arose. And what I realized was, I realized a few universal truths. One is that the real enemy is not someone or something outside of us. The real enemy is the unexamined mind that unconsciously projects its suffering onto the other and then blames and scapegoats the other for its suffering. And then I recognize the greatest principle, this another universal principle. The root cause of suffering and of conflict, and you can relate this to Israel-Palestine. And in fact, I encourage people to contemplate this, because the more you contemplate it, the more you will clarity you will gain in your view of the world. The root cause of suffering and conflict is the attachment to a presumed, limited, and mortal identity, mortal in big capital letters, and to the beliefs and images that emanate from and reinforce that presumption. Okay? This is why people would rather, and this is a universal principle, it applies to everyone. In the case of Israel, it certainly applies to a pathological degree. But, and when I say Israel, I mean people who support Israel. But this root of suffering, this explains why it is so hard for people to inquire into their beliefs, why they cling to these false beliefs that only create more suffering in the world. It's why people will send their children to war before they will inquire into their beliefs. It's why people will support this genocide of tens of thousands of people before they will inquire into their beliefs and challenge their presumed identity. Okay? So this is kind of the gist of what happened. I could go on. Well, let me just say that another insight I realized, that with regard to Israel, the real conflict is not Israel versus the Palestinian people or Israel versus a hostile world. The real conflict is the fear of integrating the hard to believe but unmistakable reality of Israel's treatment of Palestinians with unquestioned loyalty to the Jewish state. One consideration recognizes Israel's dark side. The other is in denial. It denies the dark side exists. And denial and projection are the tools that the unexamined mind uses to maintain its presumed limited identity and its idealistic imagery. So, for example, using myself as an example, though it applies to everyone I've ever spoken to, I always saw Israel as an innocent nation fighting for its life against a bunch of psychopathic Arabs, to be honest.
Okay, I mean, hey, that is, let me tell you, Richard, we hear it all the time. That is what they say.
I know. So what happened was, so I always saw Israel that way. So what I realized in this awakening to my true nature is that I never cared about Israel. I never saw the real Israel. All my life defending Israel, and which I did a lot, I would always defend Israel. And I would use, the only book I had ever read was From Time Immemorial by Joan Peters, which was debunked as trash and propaganda by Israeli Zionist scholars, as well as American and European. But I would always defend Israel. I always had an internal logic that is collective. I've heard my friends and other Jews say this, use the same arguments. Oh, no, Israel never targets children. Hamas and the other terrorist groups always embed their soldiers in civilian populations, so Israel accidentally might kill children, but it's Hamas's fault. Okay, all these common collective arguments, okay? But what I saw, when I thought about Israel and when I looked at Israel, I didn't see the Israel that exists. What I saw were the idealistic images of Israel that I had projected onto the Israel that exists. And those idealistic images, because they were part and parcel of my identity and meant to reinforce, aggrandize, and validate my presumed limited and mortal identity, they had to conform with how I saw myself. I saw myself as fair and humane. So I projected those values onto Israel and saw Israel as fair and humane. But what I was doing was I was hiding from the real Israel. I was making the real Israel into my idealistic version of Israel. That's why I say I never cared about Israel or saw Israel. It's all narcissism. In Freudian psychology, narcissism is the primary characteristic of human beings. Okay? Now, of course, there's malignant narcissism, which we see in particular with Trump, Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich. Those are really malignant psychopathic narcissists. But my point is that the main goal of every separate person, of every person who identifies as separate self, is to aggrandize their identity, validate their identity, and protect and defend their identity. So that's the gist of what happened. I can go into the historical material I discovered. I did discover that everything I believed, every argument I ever heard in defense of Israel was either factually incorrect or, if there was some truth to it, cynically taken out of context for the purpose of exonerating Israel and character assassinating the Palestinians. Okay, so I'll leave it at there for now because you probably have some questions by now.
No, I mean, it's so important to hear this because now when you were saying we thought that, Israel is being attacked by all these, crazy Arabs. Why is it that Israelis or particularly some, I don't know if I want to say Jewish individuals dehumanize the Palestinians so much? Is this indoctrinated
No,
growing
it's
up?
not.
Oh,
Well, and it's indoctrinated or conditioned by their own mind, by my mind, by everybody's mind. What I mean by that is you cannot kill someone if you see them as a human being. First, it happens unconsciously and it's very quick. You will dehumanize the person, and then you're able to kill them. So throughout the 75, really throughout the decades, really since Theodor Herzl, but in particular since 1948. Israelis have identified Palestinians as cockroaches, beasts walking on two legs, et cetera, et cetera. And we all heard, on October 7, 2023, I'm sure we all heard numerous rabbis, virtually everybody in the military and political establishment calling for genocide. I heard rabbis say we should kill every child. I heard one rabbi say, we can leave the children under 4 years old. We can let them live, but everybody else has to die. Okay? And it's because they don't see them as human beings. And they don't even see, they're so narcissistic, they don't even see that what Hamas did, and 80 to 85% of the Hamas militants on October 7th were orphans. I wonder why. But they can't even see that what Hamas did on that October 7th, 2023, Israel has done to the Palestinians far worse. And let me give you one example. Operation Cast Lead started on December 27, 2008. In 2014, Protective Edge was much worse. But let me use Cast Lead as an example. On December 27, 2008, Israel violated a ceasefire agreement it had with Hamas, and it violated the Jewish Sabbath by attacking attacking Gaza at 11:30 in the morning. It bombed the main shopping center in Gaza City at 11:30, probably the most populated spot in the Gaza Strip at that moment. Killed over 200 people the first day, okay? And that was the start of Operation Cast Lead. Exactly 2 weeks later, on another Saturday, another Shabbos, Israel prevented humanitarian aid, desperately needed humanitarian aid, from entering Gaza. And when the humanitarian organizations begged Israel, the officials, please let the humanitarian aid in, people are dying, the answer was, we can't because we can't violate the Shabbos. We can't violate Sabbath. That is the contempt with which Israel treats other human beings who it does not see as human. One other example was the end of the Second Lebanon War. It ended in August, I can't remember the exact date, but it ended in August of 2006. 4 days before the formal end of that conflict, Israel and Lebanon and Hezbollah agreed to a ceasefire. In the intervening short amount of time between the agreement and the formal start of the ceasefire, Israel launched, I believe it's tens of thousands of cluster bombs all over Lebanon. Each cluster bomb contains hundreds of bomblets. And about 30% of the cluster bombs, Israel knows all this, about 30% of the cluster bombs do not detonate on impact. So what happens is all throughout Lebanon, all throughout the country, kids in particular might see something, a little canister, it looks like a can. They'll pick it up and it'll blow up and blow off an arm or maybe blow off their face. This is how cynical and cruel and sadistic Israel is. And I have to say that as deluded as I was and as out of touch with my humanity as I was not so far gone that I'm sure, 99% sure, that I would have seen the reality of what is going on, beginning with Israel's response to Hamas's attack. Because number one, I thought he was an aberration, but I always detested Benjamin Netanyahu when he was prime minister in the 90s. I knew that he was a pathological liar. Number two, I could never have accepted Ben Gvir and Smotrich and their blatant Jewish supremacy and their hate speech. I could not have accepted that. I would have, somehow, I know I would have realized on or right after October 7th, 2023, I can't support this anymore. There's something wrong. Fortunately for me, my awakening happened in 2006, but it's available to anybody. All they have to do is contemplate the facts. Have the courage to look at the facts. And I'm saying that because everybody I've ever met who defends Israel doesn't know the history. They think they do. Some of them think they do. But they cherry pick the history and they don't study it to any thorough degree. A couple examples are the ridiculous arguments they make about the partition plan, as if that justifies Israel, as if that makes Israel not culpable, whereas the Palestinians are, and the argument that the Arab leaders in 1948 encouraged Palestinians to flee their homes. Those are ridiculous arguments, even aside from the historical fallacies that they make. The arguments themselves, and if you want, I'll go into them, but they are ridiculous. But I don't know of any argument that you can make that justifies what Israel is doing. There isn't any. Everything has to be looked at in the context of Israel's subjugation of the Palestinian people for over 75 years, its blatant violation of international law, and its blatant cruelty and the Zionist agenda to transfer the indigenous population to what David Ben-Gurion called compulsory transfer. So I'll stop right there for now.
It's amazing,
You
Richard.
said something, right? Yeah, I mean, everything that you've been saying, everything that we've been hearing from a lot of the Israelis, the Zionists, however you identify, is exactly what you were saying. And I wanted to, one thing that we always hear is if you're a Jew and you go into Gaza, you will never make it out. So could you tell us about your visit to Gaza and the West Bank?
Yeah, both times when I was there, I've been there. I was in the West Bank a couple of times. I regularly, in the West Bank in particular, regularly walked at night, whether it was in Ramallah, East Jerusalem, some of the villages. I regularly walked alone at night. And I often encountered people, and everybody I encountered, every Palestinian I encountered, I told them I was Jewish. And they didn't bat an eye. They said, well, Judaism is not almost everybody said, well, Judaism is not the problem, Zionism is the problem. And in Gaza, same thing. I walked at night. I had no problem. I'm sure I ran into some Hamas people, but people were friendly to me. First of all, they're going to know that an American or, a Westerner in Gaza probably is not a pro-Israeli guy, okay? But I was very impressed with the attitude, the generosity, the kindness, the hospitality of Palestinians. I wouldn't blame, let's put it this way. I'll bet you in the 1930s, 1940s, every Jew in the world would have been happy if every German had been killed, okay? Or at least every Nazi or every Nazi sympathizer, or every citizen who didn't speak out against the Nazis, what the Nazis were doing. So you often hear people who support Israel, you often hear them say, well, the Palestinians want to destroy us, Hamas wants to destroy us. They're basing that on an unexamined charter from 1988 that they never looked into, and they are ignoring the 2017 new charter from Hamas, and they're ignoring the fact that what they are saying, it's a projection. It's Israel that has always wanted to expel the Palestinians, and in particular, since October 7th, 2023, they don't just want to expel them, they would rather murder them. I'm telling you, they would rather see them dead, because a dead Palestinian cannot attack a kibbutz, okay? But I was horrified by the attack on the kibbutz, but I understood why it happened. 80 to 85% of the Hamas militants are orphans who participated in that attack, okay? What are the Palestinians supposed to do? Okay, according to Israel and its supporters, who only care about the deaths and the hostages that are Israeli or that are Jewish, they don't give a damn about the tens of thousands of Palestinians who have been tortured, and are in prisons. I think 800,000 Palestinians have been in prisons over the years. Okay? But you have to look at why did it happen? The Palestinians just didn't wake up one day and say, oh, you know what, I hate Jews, I'm going to go kill a bunch. No, there was decades leading up to this. It was and not only that, Netanyahu was informed by Egypt a day before that Hamas was going to attack. Mike McCall, who is the Republican congressman from, I believe, Texas, who is the head of one of the foreign services committees in the House of Representatives, acknowledged that. He knew it too. And he knew that Israel knew it a day before. What happened on October 7th was a dream come true for Benjamin Netanyahu, who does not care about anybody. He particularly hates Palestinians, who he calls Amalekites, meaning they should all be killed, including their livestock if you read the Torah. But Netanyahu has always, his whole life, wanted to ethnically cleanse the land of Palestinians and be the modern day Moses or Moshiach, Messiah. So this was a dream come true, and he had a fool of an American president to facilitate this for him. A deluded American president who was the biggest, still to this day, is the biggest congressional recipient of money from AIPAC in the history of AIPAC, okay, who calls himself a proud Zionist because he's gotten a lot of money from Zionists, doesn't know anything about the history, who had a Secretary of State who went to Israel, and the first thing he told the Israelis was, I come as a Jew. Not as an American, not as the American Secretary of State. I come as a Jew. I'm part of the tribe. I'm one of you. I feel your pain just like you feel your pain. Therefore, I'm going to help you perpetrate genocide. I want to add, Anthony Blinken is the Secretary of State, who I believe is a traitor to the United States. He knew, as the head of the State Department, that in 1943, the U.S. State Department called the Zionist Project said that the Zionist Project was identifying Jews as a religious and nationalistic group, and that its ideology was based on blood and soil, which was the ideology of the Nazis, and the State Department explicitly said that the Zionist Project was very much like the Nazi project. And a few years later, the revisionist Zionists, the Jabotinsky wing, Jabotinsky was dead by then, but a few years later, the revisionists, actually around that same time, the revisionists went to Nazi Germany and said, look, you believe the Aryan race is superior, we believe the Jews are superior. So why don't you let the Jews of Germany come to Palestine? And that was one of their arguments, okay, to the Germans. And then they tried to they did, I won't get into this today because it's too long, but they did engage in what they called the transfer agreement, which may have saved Nazi Germany or the Hitler regime from being overthrown or from collapsing, because it saved Germany from a worldwide boycott, economic boycott. But I don't want to get into that now because we don't have enough time.
I mean, I have so many questions. There's a lot of people that are requesting to come up as well. I can see a lot of Zionists disagreeing with you in the comments. If anybody has anything that they want to come up and ask, you are welcome to request. I'm just gonna, you know what, I'm gonna pass it to the panel, and then if my questions aren't asked, I'll go back to it. But I mean, this information is this is exposing Israel, exposing the Zionists, exposing what we've been saying, right? But you're saying you had to dismantle this from your ideas and your childhood growing up. So, thank you, Richard, for sharing all of this. We have almost 400 people here, guys, so continue to protect the live and share it. I'm going to open the panel to our sister Didi. Please try to keep it to one question because there is a lot of people that do want to come up and ask questions. So go ahead, Didi.
Hi, Richard. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
You're welcome.
Wow. That was a lot. And hearing all that, it's stuff that we say consistently. So to hear it from somebody that's literally had to deconstruct their mind, right? Literally had to rip this out from,
Right.
It sounds like from what you've learned from childhood. That must have been a lot. So my questions to you, just because Judaism is similar to Islam, where community is very important, right? Your community, your people, the people you surround yourself with are important. They're your lifeline. How was it when you came out with these opinions and you started being vocal? What was the backlash from the community, if any?
I have been,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, I would say I've been shunned by a lot of Jewish people I grew up with. I'm still in touch with Jewish people I've known since I was 3 years old, okay? Now, here's an interesting phenomenon, and this applies everywhere. None of my Jewish friends who still support Israel has read a book. They won't read my book, even when I give it to them, okay? But they think they know more than me. They can't admit they haven't even read a book even. I tell them, look, why don't you read a book? You can read it in the comfort of your own home. No one has to know you're reading it. You can put the book down whenever you want. You don't have to believe a word you read. But at least if you read the book, you'll develop the respect for yourself that comes with at least entertaining the idea that maybe you could learn something about this issue. They will not do it. It used to be in Judaism when I was growing up, and I had my family, my relatives, there were some very highly educated people, okay? But it used to be that in Judaism, education was really looked at as a very great value. Nowadays, when it comes to Israel-Palestine, the more educated you are on the subject, the more ignorant you are perceived to be. And the more ignorant you are on the subject, the more educated you're perceived to be. People are in denial. As I say, they would rather send their children to war than inquire into their beliefs. They would rather commit genocide. They would rather Israel sacrifice the lives of thousands of Jews before they will even question their identity. And the amazing thing is, if they would question their identity, they would experience a great relief in regaining their humanity. That is what is so amazing. But the tenaciousness of the presumed identity, the belief that we are separate selves, is so powerful. It is the most powerful force probably in the universe, the attachment to a presumed, limited, and mortal identity. Okay? But all you have to do is start inquiring within. Just start questioning your beliefs. At least acknowledge, well, you know what? I have these beliefs just like my family or my Jewish friends. And the reason I have these beliefs is because I identify as a Jew. But what if I had been stolen from the cradle and raised by a Saudi couple in Saudi Arabia, and they were conservative Muslims? Would I have the same beliefs if those were the circumstances that I have now? No. My beliefs come from my conditioning, and they come subliminal, not just blatantly, but also subliminally. For example, just as we all model the speech patterns and the walking patterns of our elders as we're growing up, a lot of the beliefs I absorbed subliminally. I didn't have to hear people telling me, okay? The belief that the Arabs want to push the Jews into the sea is almost subliminal. David Ben-Gurion in the 1950s used to call Gamal Abdel Nasser, the head of Egypt and the most charismatic leader in the Arab world, the Hitler on the Nile. That reinforced beliefs that the Arabs wanted to complete what the Nazis tried to complete against Jews. And that is why so often you hear Israelis refer to the Palestinians as Nazis. It's a projection. Who is committing the Nazi behavior? Most prominently, the Jews. And they're causing all this, to use the Jewish Yiddish word surus, all this uproar, all this suffering, okay? And of course there's always going to be some Palestinians who will react with violence. Of course there will, but it's a small minority. And most Palestinians, in fact, pretty much all Palestinians, just want to live in peace. I want to mention, since 1988, contrary to the Israeli Hasbara, the propaganda, Hamas has made well over a dozen attempts to make peace with the Israelis. Jimmy Carter has acknowledged it. The New York Times has acknowledged it. The Strategic Studies Institute at the U.S. Army War College has acknowledged it. Former Mossad chiefs Ephraim Halevi and Yuval Diskin have acknowledged it. George W. Bush and Obama got letters from Hamas. They've all ignored this. Israel gets its way because of the money and the power it has in the U.S., and that power is enormous. They control Middle East policy in the United States.
Wow.
Cannot thank you enough for that answer. That was amazing. Thank you so much. I'm going to drop to make more room, but it's been a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Dee Dee, for that. We'll go next to DJK.
Hi, thank you, Richard, for being here with us today. We truly appreciate you taking out the time. So as we know, AIPAC has a lot of control over our Congress. But I would like to ask you, what are your thoughts on the other pro-Israeli lobby groups, such as like J Street, Republican Jewish Coalition, Christians United for Israel, Zionist Organization of America? And do you believe that they are as much of a threat to America's democracy as AIPAC?
Actually, yes, the CUFI, Christians United for Israel, the Christian lobby, the evangelical Christian lobby, is extremely powerful. John Hagee, who's the founder of CUFI, claims he has 50 million followers. I don't think it's that many. I think CUFI's enrollment is somewhere around 7 million, although I'm sure there's many more Christians who are not enrolled in CUFI who sympathize with Hagee. I do think the evangelical Christian movement is extremely powerful. They are powerful in the Trump administration. And of course, I'll just mention this since not everybody may be aware of this. They believe in the second coming of Christ. And for Christ to come a second time, the Palestinians must be ethnically cleansed from Israel, so it will be all Jewish. Then the second coming can happen, and Armageddon will happen and all that. And Jews who don't convert to Christianity will go to hell, okay? And John Hagee has said that Adolf Hitler was a half-breed Jew, and that Hitler was sent by God to shepherd the Jewish people to the Holy Land. And Jews who didn't believe Theodor Herzl were condemned to suffering. Hagee is spouting anti-Semitic garbage. And yet, as Theodor Herzl predicted, the anti-Semites will be our best friend. As Abba Eban, foreign minister, UN representative, revered by the American Jewish community, used to say, I forget what he used to say. That's in my book. I forget what I was going to say that he used to say. Sorry. Anyway, and AIPAC is a very powerful organization. They have huge influence in Congress. My congressman is a black congressman. I have written to him and said, well, I assume you would be more sensitive to segregation policies and apartheid than most Americans, given that you're an African American. And yet he's one of the strongest defenders of Israel because his biggest contributor is AIPAC. Okay? So it's almost like a mass psychosis that has taken over the United States and other parts of the world, but the United States in particular, with their close relationship to Israel. That close relationship, Netanyahu has been trying to get the United States to attack Iran for 30 years under the pretense that they're just about to get the bomb, the nuclear bomb. This has been going on for 30 years. He doesn't care about the lives of Americans that might be sacrificed. In this delusional, in these delusional politics, the United States operates its foreign policy on fantasy. Okay, the fantasy that in 2003 that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, which they didn't. Biden's fantasy that Hamas wanted to destroy Israel and Israel was only defending itself. I mean, it's unbelievable how disturbed so many of our leaders are and how unwilling they are to challenge the prevailing beliefs that have been indoctrinated into so many people that are false. So we have to be careful. AIPAC is very powerful. Congress is definitely afraid of AIPAC, but the Christian evangelical movement, led by people like Hagee, remember, a lot of Republicans in Congress are evangelicals or are very sympathetic to them, to that dispensationalist movement that believes in the second coming.
Thank you. Thank you for that
Thank
answer.
you.
I know we're short on time, Taz. I would
Yeah.
like to ask a really quick question. I'm sorry, I have like 100 questions, but I want to ask this question real quick, if it's okay.
Okay. Yeah,
And then I'll make it
and
quick.
okay, yeah, and whoever
All right.
wants to ask, please just request. We will try to get as many questions answered as possible.
And,
But
and
yeah,
then
go ahead,
and
DJ.
then I'll drop right away. So thank you very much, Richard, for going through that with us. I truly appreciate it. So now going back to APEC, as we know, just for an example, like Jamal Bowman, they put out a $10 million campaign against him to get him out of office. Same for Cori Bush. I think she was a $5 million campaign, along with many others. Is there any way, if you cannot, I understand, but can you kind of walk walk us through how fast they move and what that process kind of looks like when they do put a campaign against these politicians, if that's
Well,
possible?
I don't have any inside knowledge, but I will say that they are very, very organized. And I know how organized they are because in 2009, when I was living in Albuquerque, I was a spokesperson for a coalition that put up billboards. We were the first city in the United States to put up billboards calling on Congress to stop giving military aid to Israel. And sorry, within within
It's okay.
24
Take some
hours,
time if you need.
within 20 within 24 hours of the time we put up the billboards, the company that which was a New York Stock Exchange company, the company that we had the contract with to put up the billboards, got their phone lines became completely swamped by AIPAC people calling and condemning the billboards. Tell Congress no more money for Israel. Stop killing children. Rather provocative, but true. And then, and it was just unbelievable within 20 hours. And we were getting emails from all over the world within 24 hours.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
So AIPAC is fast. They're much more organized than the Palestinian Solidarity Lobby.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for being here
God
with
for
us, Richard.
APAC.
David, let's just
Thank you.
wait our turn. David, please have some decorum. Taz, thank
Thank you,
you for this
DJK.
amazing live, W live, guys. Keep liking and sharing the live. Send some team points if you can so we can continue to protect the live. Thank you, Taz.
Thank you, DJK. Thank you. We'll go next to Mr. B.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm an American Jew, and I'm kind of just waking up to the reality of the situation in all the same ways that you were just describing. And so I'm coming to terms with like a whole sort of range of emotions and really like deconstructing the, just layers and layers of propaganda.
Right.
To try to
Yeah, let me point out,
understand what's going on.
some of the propaganda is self-created. It's self-generated within the minds
Sure.
of those who are not in touch with their humanity. Okay, just
Right.
keep that in mind.
Yes, that is true, but I mean direct actual propaganda as
Right,
well.
so you better ask your questions.
Right, my question. So what are some actionable steps you would recommend to people like me who are just now waking up? I'm reading, I'm learning, I'm listening, I'm
You're doing
attending
everything
these.
that you should be doing. Read my book. My book goes through most of the arguments that the Jewish side, that the pro-Israel side makes. Get involved in your community if you can with organizations that, with benign organizations that are not anti-Semitic. Most of them are not. But get involved with organizations that support that support Palestinian freedom and equality for all people. I will say that I'm disappointed in all of the organizations, but they do good work. The reason I'm disappointed is because they have no interest in the psycho-spiritual aspects of this problem. They're not interested in what's going on inside the mind. So they don't care about, for example, my definition of the root cause of suffering. And I don't believe that suffering can end. I don't believe that this can be solved without understanding what is going on inside our minds. It's an ego thing. We are all defending our egos to greater and lesser extents. But you sound like you're doing the right thing. Congratulations. I commend you on being open-minded and being willing to challenge your identity. That's a big, big step. And more people need to do it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. B. We'll go next to Rima.
Yeah, so I know we've got a lot of people requesting, Richard, thank you for your bravery. I appreciate it. I understand how difficult this is when something is particularly expected of you and you're going against the grain. Wow, I have so many questions.
Read my book. You'll get some of them answered.
Yeah, well, I guess questions for you, and I absolutely will. So Daniel Manson, I'm going to ask a question from the audience. It's a request. Daniel Manson from the audience, he's an anti-Zionist. He's thinking about leaving Zionism. And then I would like to ask my own question. He was just asking, he said that since he wants to leave Zionism, he wondered if Israel was in fact behind the 9/11 attacks, and it could be just a yes or no, and it's okay if you.
I know a lot of people who are heavily involved in the 9/11 movement who claim that
Yeah.
Israel was behind them. I don't know. I have no
Okay.
knowledge of that.
Thank you, Richard.
You're
But
welcome.
that's your
Okay.
answer, Daniel. And then can I ask my second question? I promise I'll be quick. This is my own question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I know that AIPAC has had, I'm sure that AIPAC does somehow fund lower level agents on platforms like TikTok, like Facebook. My question is why the agents that they're looking for and that they hire to spread their propaganda on a lower level, why are, and I'm sorry, Richard, this is a little bit funny, but they're such low level agents that have done nothing but actually destroy the entire agenda of AIPAC. Do you have any remarks regarding that, or
Yes,
do
I
you?
do.
Yes, go ahead.
First of all, Israel has a handbook. It's called the Hasbara Handbook. It teaches people how to make the argument on behalf of Israel. Okay, Israel has a directorate, an actual office that is designated for Hasbara. Okay, Israel pays people on college campuses. I think they have thousands of agents who spread this Hasbara. They do it in a subtle way. I have caught a few people. Okay, I have actually caught some people who were Hasbara agents and then they disappeared, and there was no trace of them ever to be found anywhere on social media or anything else. Okay, but they are. Israel is extreme. AIPAC and Israel, they're extremely sophisticated. These may be low level, but they reach a lot of people. The ones you're talking about. Okay, and Israel, they're just so sophisticated in getting in representing and promoting their agenda, and the agenda is the Palestinians want to kill us. Therefore, we have to defend ourselves. We and the United States share common values. We're the only democracy in the Middle East. It's all bullshit. How can anyone think that Itamar Ben-Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich, and Benjamin Netanyahu have democratic values? They're all self-described Jewish supremacists whose entire lives has been to dispossess the Palestinians. They're all blatant bigots. And as Tamir Pardo, the former head of Mossad, said, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, and he could have included Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich are much worse than the KKK. Or as Ehud Olmert, former prime minister, protege of Ariel Sharon, Olmert recently said, within the last year, that Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, and Netanyahu are murderers, terrorists, butchers, and killers. Okay? There's a lot of Israelis, a lot of prominent Israelis who know what these people are up to. I think everybody must know that Netanyahu is just a psychopathic, pathological liar who wants to destroy the Palestinian people for his own self-gratification. Okay? He is a true supreme narcissist.
Richard, I'm gonna drop, and I hope to see you
Thank
again.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rima. I just wanted to first shout out for Ask the User. Thank you for the subs. Appreciate you. And anybody that is requesting, please let me know if you're just
Let
boosting or
some
if
of
you
the
have a
Zionists
question.
ask questions if you can.
There's a Zionist here. We'll get to him in just a second. Go ahead, Jabber.
Hi, Richard. I don't know what to say. I'm like, you're my hero. The last 9 months, I have your book in print. I have it on Kindle. I read the preface, the opening preface to probably, I mean, I've done it on TikTok a few times and to several people, friends, family. It's been a rough go. I'm a New Yorker, Long Island. My parents were born in 43 and 46, so not far off. And when you were talking about I saw you on India Left Global, that interview. And anyway, that led me to you. Thank you for all you do and who you are. I guess I'm just struggling with how to keep my composure, because a lot of friends have, they've turned it around on me, and it's the whole, is it worth losing all your friends? And I'm like, but I'm not the one who made the decision here, right? I'm standing up for what's right and looking at the truth. And they've all just turned around and just walked away. And it's been very rough. Family, friends. I was uninvited to Thanksgiving for something like Peripheral. So my main question is, as far as keeping it all together, like Wallace Shawn said last week with Katie Halper, it feels like if you don't see that what they're doing right now is similar to what the Nazis were doing, then you're in a different universe. He says,
Yes.
I don't even know how to talk to you. And that's exactly everything that you've been talking about, and he's been talking about, and I've been feeling all of that for 15 months. And I feel I feel better about myself and who I am as a person. But I am definitely on the flip side, it's like a different kind of existence. Like I've crossed over into this other plane, and they're not with me, and it's tough.
They're not. It's only a minority. Unfortunately, it's only a minority that seems to get it because of the incredibly tenacious attachment to presumed identities. I want to mention very quickly, my books are on Amazon. Someone asked that question. Okay, the primary disposition of the separate self, of the ego identity, is existential fear and confusion. Okay, confusion always accompanies existential fear because existential fear is the lens through which we see the world. In my case, what happened was the existential fear and confusion vanished and was replaced by compassion and clarity. Compassion is always accompanied by clarity because compassion enables you to see the world from a 360-degree perspective. So what I'm saying is your friends are terrified. They are, it's mostly unconscious, okay? And the terror is unnecessary, but it's common, it's expected. They are terrified of dying. That's why I say the root cause of suffering is the attachment to a presumed, limited, and mortal identity, and to the beliefs and images that emanate from and reinforce that presumption. So when your beliefs and images are challenged, and those beliefs and images are precious to you, and to your unconscious mind, to yourself, to your ego identity, they form a part of your identity, it is terror, okay? But if they would just start reading a book, or reading articles, there are so many Jewish people, including former heads of Shin Bet, the Israeli security agency. So many heads of Shin Bet have acknowledged that the greatest threat to Israel is not the Palestinian people, but the occupation itself. Okay? So all I can tell you is thank you for your courage. Thank you for your commitment.
Just hanging in there. You
got to hang in there. One day, maybe some of your friends will see the light. But if they would just read a book, okay?
That's what I've been trying to push yours and several others as well. Absolutely. Sokach, Daniel Sokach, and anything. Anyway, I'll move on. Thank you so much. You're the best, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Jabber. Sorry, the Zionist actually ran away after you. I think they got scared. But there is one other one. We'll go to East LA. Go ahead, East LA.
My question is to the author. Sir, just at about a rate of 100%, every person that you are addressing on this panel supports and is willing to prosecute a conflict that would eliminate the entire Jewish state. How do you react to this?
I'll tell you how I react. I will say that Israel has rejected every peace proposal since 1948. There's been dozens upon dozens, that Israel does not want to make peace, that Israel does not want to comply with international law. And as I said earlier, Hamas has offered many peace agreements, more than a dozen since 1988. So you're repeating a myth. It is not true. Believe me, Palestinian families, first of all, Palestinians are human beings like you and me. Okay, we're all in this together. Jew, Muslim, Christian, Palestinian, Chinese, we are all in this together. We share a common humanity. It's just that many people are divorced from their common humanity. And in Israel and among the Jews see themselves as the eternal victim, as the victim of anti-Semitism, which was the philosophical basis of Zionism, okay? The ideology of Zionism. But Israel has had many opportunities, even now, to make peace. If they would make peace, as Yitzhak Rabin said, you don't make peace with your friends. You make peace with some very unsavory enemies. And yes, some members of Hamas are bloodthirsty killers, and I understand why. I'm not condoning it, but I understand what would make a person want to kill a whole other race of people. But that is not the common reality among Palestinians. I am amazed. For the last nearly 20 years, I've been amazed at how compassionate and empathetic accepting Palestinians are of Jews. I mean, most Jews would automatically dismiss any Palestinian who, because if they have this idea that Palestinians want to kill all Jews, most Jews would just automatically, ipso facto, reject any Palestinian. But so many Palestinians are so grateful to Jews who are willing to speak up. And I'll give you an example of one situation. I once did, years ago, I did an interview on radio with a Palestinian man who lives in the South United States. And he had a journalist on from Jordan. She was Palestinian by birth. She lived in Jordan. She'd never been outside of the Middle East. And after the interview, at the end of the interview, she said, you know what? I used to think all Jews were haters and wanted to kill us all. And all Jews were mean. And I was an anti-Semite, anti-Semite meaning a Jew hater. And she said, but I can't be that anymore. After listening to you, I realize not all Jews are like that. Okay? But I am telling you, don't believe that hasbara. Read a book. Go online to Amazon and get my book, Wake Up and Reclaim Your Humanity. You can look at all the documentation. It's meticulously documented. I want to mention, because my identical twin brother and his family are Hasidic Jews who hate Arabs and believe that and support anything Israel does, including genocide. When I wrote my book, I wrote it with them in mind, which meant that I had to be so impeccable with my source material. And my sources were Israeli Ministries of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Internal Security, Shin Bet, the Israeli Security Agency, Mossad, Israeli Prime Ministers, the Book of the Haganah, published by the Israeli Military Press, the Paratroopers Handbook, which is another aspect of the Israeli military. I mostly used Israeli government sources, so my relatives couldn't say you're making this up, okay? I'm telling you, study the history, regain your humanity. You can do it. Don't believe what anyone tells you, including me. Find out for yourself, and do it with an open mind and a commitment to the truth.
May I ask one more follow-up question, please?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Here's my next. And then I'll respectfully drop. Thank you for the time. Do you personally support the existence and the right to self-determination of the Israeli Jewish state?
I believe that all human beings have a right to live wherever they want, as long as they don't impinge upon the rights of other people. I believe that that Israel could make peace if it wanted to. It has always rejected peace because it wants more land. If you may have heard Bezalel Smotrich a week or two ago saying that according to the Torah, God gave the land from the Euphrates to the Nile to the Jewish people. Therefore, within the next 80 years, Israel will take over Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, the southern half of Turkey. I may have missed a country in there. This is what they believe. Okay? All people have the right to self-determination without prejudice. Nobody is any better than anybody else. I will say, ideally, I would like to see a single state, because the Jews are not going to leave, okay? I would ideally like to see a single state where Palestinians and Israelis live together in peace, and they could rename the state Palestine as long as they spell the last 5 letters Stein. I just had to say that. But it's ridiculous. People can live in peace. They just have to recognize their common humanity and stop identifying so strongly with an illusion. Our identities are illusion. They are mental ideas. Like I said earlier, you can be born a Jew, even to an Orthodox Jewish family, even if you were the child of Benjamin Netanyahu, if you were stolen at birth or as a child and raised in a Muslim country by a Muslim family, you would not be supporting Israel the way you or a lot of people do.
Thank you, Richard, for that. Thank you, East LA. I hope you can take that. And for everybody, please, his book is called Wake Up and Reclaim Your Humanity. So if anybody that does want to purchase that, please make sure you look into that. We'll go next to Ronnie, and then we'll go to Ask the Doc. And I know DJK wanted to ask another question. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Thank you so much for having me up, Taz, and thank you so much, Richard, for joining us today on your birthday.
You're welcome.
Happy birthday to you.
Thank
Hopefully you
you.
can enjoy it with your family after this. Just a couple of questions, and I'm going to be quick. Number one, you said earlier that you have family or you had family in the West Bank in some of the settlements. Do they still live there? And if so, do you still have contact with them? How's the dynamics of that relationship?
My niece and her family live in the West Bank in a ideological settlement, although she's not that religious anymore. I haven't been in contact with her for a while, but not because of a disagreement over Israel-Palestine. We don't talk about it. I'm sure she supports the state of Israel, okay, the way it is. But I have learned that there's no point in arguing with people whose minds are not going to change. There's no point in creating bad blood. I accept my family the way they are, and I hope maybe one day they will change, but there's no point in arguing with them. That, when I did in the past, it didn't accomplish anything, okay? I want to mention one thing, and this is not, I wanted to mention this earlier and I forgot. One of the arguments that I often hear from Zionists is that Israel has a eternal claim to the Holy Land because God gave it to Israel and all this. I want to mention that if Jews have the right to ethnically cleanse another people and kill them to take over their land, don't Muslims have the same right if they believe the Quran teaches them that the land is holy for them? But the main thing is that this argument is the opposite of what I'm saying. I'm saying we need to recognize our common humanity with all people. That argument says we are tribes. We are immersed in tribal thinking, which is one of the most primitive and unevolved philosophies or ideologies possible, and we want a world of us against them. And we even want to go back, and if they're invoking the Torah that says, God gave the land to the Jews. Of course, my reading is God promised Abraham that his progeny would have the land, and one of his progeny was Ishmael. But aside from that, if they're arguing, if they want to go back thousands of years, do they believe that women have no rights? Do they believe in slavery? They're so confused that they're using this almost as just a slogan. Oh, well, God gave the land to the Jews, therefore they can do anything you want. Religion is not about self-aggrandizement. It's not about greed and acquisition and stealing land from other people and denying their humanity. What kind of God, what kind of decent God would want his flock to grow like that? It's such an unevolved and primitive disposition. I just had to mention that because I had forgotten it earlier.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Ronnie, for that
Thank you
question.
so much. Thank you.
We'll go to Ask the Doc, and then I'm going to go to Guy Fawkes after, and then we'll go back to Ahlam and DJ K. Go ahead, Ask the Doc.
Yeah, my service is pretty bad. I had a question, Richard. Did you create any works on the details of APEC and how they?
No, I didn't.
You were a part of APEC?
I was a member. I was not anything special. I was just a regular dues-paying member.
What do you mean by that?
I donated to AIPAC. That made me a member.
So there's a certain amount of money, I believe, that you donate that makes you a member of AIPAC.
Yeah, I mean, I supported AIPAC because I believed in their cause, which was defending Israel. That's it. And then subsequently, after I had this awakening, I got a call from AIPAC asking me for more money. I said, I can't give money to your organization unless you start advocating for peace with the Palestinians. And the person on the other end said, well, we do what Israel tells us to do. Okay, which I had already realized was the case, meaning AIPAC is an arm of the Israeli government. They should be registered as a foreign agent. Actually, they should not be registered at all. They should not be allowed to operate. In my opinion, they're a criminal organization supporting Israel's violations of international law and its war crimes and crimes against humanity. They're justifying it. They're polluting the minds of their followers, and they're basically blackmailing most Congress people into doing their bidding, even against their own values. Of course, that doesn't say speak highly of Congress people if they have so little character that they're going to support genocide just so they can get reelected in 2 or 6 years.
Okay. Did you have another question, Doc?
No, I was just, I guess the thing is AIPAC has contributed to the unaliving of so many Palestinian children and the displacement of millions.
Correct.
So for me, being a part of an organization like that makes you guilty of some of those crimes.
I agree with you.
And I would think that the best way to compensate, even if it's possible, is to create works that kind of discuss the ins and the outs, because I don't think people know as much about AIPAC as they should.
People don't know as much as they should about most things, but I want to point out that I agree with you, but the main thing is not AIPAC. The main thing is the unexamined mind that doesn't question itself, that goes along with what fits its conditioning and what fits its beliefs, its precious beliefs and images. It's the unexamined mind that is the real culprit here, and many unexamined minds have formed AIPAC. Okay, but it starts with the individual. The individual has to start waking up, and once enough individuals wake up, there won't be any AIPACs, or the AIPACs will be at least greatly minimized, and things can start changing. And so instead of having a future of more terror and more horror and more suffering, we could have a more benign future where people realize that we're all in the same boat. We are all human beings. We share a common humanity. I literally realized that I was as much Palestinian, as Israeli, as American, as Sudanese, as Jew, as Muslim, as Buddhist, as Christian. I realized that because that is who we are before we assume the mantle of a presumed limited and mortal identity. I'm telling you, our presumed identities, these limited identities, they are belief systems. That's all it is. Most of us, probably none of us, even remember 5% of every minute of our lives. Well, what 5% do we remember? We remember selectively the 5% that forms an identity. Okay? An identity that is precious to us. But what if the 5% that we remember was a completely different 5%? We would be a completely different person. So what I'm saying is, prior to those memories that we are attached to, because we don't have to believe them. We can let them go. They can pass right through us. But prior to the presumption of an identity is our true nature, which is unlimited. It was never born and it doesn't die. It is the true nature of all of the universe. Okay? I'm getting a little spiritual here, but you can read about it in the writings of Adidas Samraj, Ramana Maharshi. Even Judaism talks about making the world a dwelling place for the divine. Unfortunately, a lot of Jews think that means killing Palestinians. It doesn't, okay? But to make the world a dwelling place for the divine is we have to recognize our own divine nature. We have to get more in touch with our common humanity with all people so that divine energy can come in, so that we're open to it. We're not open to it if we're defending these presumed limited identities that elevate one people over another people and give blessings to one people while destroying another people. That is the most primitive consciousness on earth. That means that evolution is so slow, in other words. We can go beyond evolution into transformation. Okay? I had a transformation. All I did was recognize who I always already was. Okay? I did not have to do anything. It just happened. But it happened by grace because I was open to it.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Ask the Doc. We'll go next to Guy Fawkes. Guy Fawkes actually purchased your book, Richard, and I think he wanted to ask a question based off of what he read. Go ahead, Guy Fawkes. He is a Zionist.
Yes, good evening. Well, it's a bit of a somber evening with the revelation of the likelihood that the Beavis infants are unalive. But let me get to my question. You spoke about identity, being an illusion. So let me challenge you a bit on that. When the Romans evicted and kicked out the Jews from Judea, was their
Oh wait, hold
identity an
on. I'm sorry.
illusion?
Just I want to make sure you have
Why
a
interrupting me
question.
though? I do have a question, but you
You're
can bear with me about 30
misunderstanding what I
seconds.
said.
Let me finish my thought, please. I
Wait, excuse
promise.
me.
Oh,
Guy
for the love
Fox,
of Christ.
please
You
keep
guys are
it
ridiculous.
respectful.
It's super
Excuse me.
respectful, but I'm 10 seconds into my,
Let
question
him ask
slash
his question.
comment.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Okay.
10 seconds in. Give me a break here. A little bit of a wide berth. Thank you. So let me, establish the parameters of why I'm asking this. Because when the Spanish and Portuguese Inquisitions happened, was the Jewish identity an illusion? When the Russian pogroms happened, was their identity an illusion? When the Holocaust happened, was the Jewish identity an illusion? So although your messaging of, coming together as a human species and bringing everyone together, borderless and, as a united planet, I agree with you. But why start with the most persecuted group of people on the planet and expect them to be the beginning
You're
of
completely
removal of
misunderstanding
tribalism?
everything I said. Let
How
me
so?
answer. Let me
Sure.
answer because a lot of people have other questions.
Please do.
One of the things that I realized is that your identity will filter what you hear and what you believe. Okay. So, and I said this earlier, but if you're protecting, and we're doing it unconsciously, but if you're protecting an identity, and we have more than one identity, okay? One of the identities that many Jews have is victims, the eternal victim, okay? If you see yourself as a victim, then you will interpret events as attempting to victimize you, certain events, okay? But what I'm saying is, yes, everybody, just about everybody, is attached to these identities, to various identities, and they are illusions, but it doesn't mean that just because they're illusions, they don't operate under those illusions. So the Spanish inquisitors, the Nazis, the fascists, and as well as the Jewish fascists, the Jewish supremacists, the people who identify with Israel as the state of the Jewish people and believe that it's always under attack. We're all of us, you can pick any villain in history, and we're all we are all taking our identity as real, as a fact, and that identity causes us, in order to comply with its beliefs and images, with its ideology, we act on behalf of that identity. Because otherwise, because the reason we act on behalf of that identity is to make it seem real. Okay, but what I'm saying is it is actually
So
an
the
illusion.
persecution of the Jews historically has been an illusion?
You're totally distorting what I'm saying.
I mean,
Okay, you
your
didn't
your
hear.
your
Just
your
a
So hold
second.
on,
mental,
Let me
mumbo
finish.
jumbo
guy.
nonsense.
Okay,
Just a
please
second.
respect the guest. He is
Now let me
speaking.
finish here. I already told you that just because it's an illusion doesn't mean that we don't operate as if it's an illusion. Lots of
All
people
right,
have been
thank you,
persecuted.
Capo. Have a
Let me
good night.
finish. Let
Fuck
me
you.
finish. Just let me finish here for a second.
So
Why don't you
disrespectful,
have the
man.
integrity to question your beliefs, okay? If you think that Benjamin Netanyahu, Ben Gvir, and Smotrich are protecting the Jewish people and doing what is necessary, you don't know anything about the history of Israel-Palestine,
Richard,
okay?
give it a
I'm
rest.
You know,
He
not
just left.
defending, I've never supported, nor have I ever defended anything that was done to the Jews. I'm just as critical of the Nazis as I am of the Israelis who support genocide against the Palestinians. Okay?
yeah.
But one of the problems with Zionists is in order to defend themselves, they totally distort what I'm saying. And you didn't understand anything I said. What you're saying is totally ridiculous. I
Yeah.
never said any of those things. Read my book. Find the courage to read my book and contemplate what I'm saying. And the themes that I was saying, such as that the root cause of suffering is the attachment to a presumed limited identity, you can't just read that in 5 seconds and think you understand it. Contemplate it, making a meditation. Make it a meditation so you could get more and more in touch with what it means, and then you will get more and more in touch with your identity. And when you do that, you will start to recognize that your real identity is your common identity with all people, and that precedes the assumption of an identity as a Jew. And as I said more than once, if you had been stolen as a baby and raised in Saudi Arabia as a Muslim, you would not have the same beliefs today that you have now. You'd have the same body and the same genes, but you wouldn't have the same beliefs. That's an example of what I mean by the illusion of identity.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Unfortunately, Guy, the gentleman that did come up, he actually, and it's exactly what you've been saying in this entire interview. He called you a capo. and he dropped and he did not. He was listening, so I apologize for the disrespect. I
It's
want to
okay. I just want to
apologize for what.
mention. I
Yes.
just want to mention that this happens all the time. They cannot take it. The Zionists will always misunderstand. They can't. As long as they're not open-minded in some way, they have to distort everything I say. I have often written articles and they have accused me of saying things I didn't even say, because they can't hear what I'm saying, because it's such a challenge, such a threat to their presumed limited immortal identity. They see themselves as fair and humane. Therefore, if I prove to them that they are supporting something that is unfair and inhumane, that is a mortal threat. They have to eliminate that threat. Now, I just want to mention some people, like we know that, for example, members of the Ku Klux Klan believe that Jews and Black and African Americans and Catholics are literally inferior. So their self-imagery does not depend on them seeing those groups of people as equal. And it's the same with a lot of Jews, especially in Israel. They don't see Palestinians as human beings. Therefore, they don't have to deal with the idea that they're fair and humane. My friends in particular, and a lot of Jews in the United States who are not as supportive of, well, I don't want to say supportive, but who are not as hateful towards Palestinians, they don't see themselves as bigots. They don't even admit, if you say, well, you think the Palestinians are subhuman, you think they're monsters, they won't admit that. Oh no, I supported civil rights in the South in the 1960s, and we're all equal. It's just that Palestinians are psychopathic killers. And so what they're doing is they're adjusting their self-imagery so that it still fits with which they identify themselves with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, Richard. We have just about 500 people here. Please continue to share and like the live. This is extremely informative, exposing, and the information here is very valuable. So please continue to share out the live. We'll go to David, who is also a Zionist. Go ahead, David.
Before David, though, just like a quick mod announcement, guys. Also, please send team bracelets and stuff just because of like the language being used, since it's not censored. Just protect the live.
I would also like to add, David, please be respectful. You should be grateful that you're allowed this platform to come up here and have this discussion, because we know that does not happen on your guys' panels. So just be respectful.
I don't
Not
need
like
you to
to
tell
think.
me
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah.
Sit down.
Okay.
Sit down.
It's okay. Guys,
I
please let
don't
me.
need you to tell me anything.
Okay, please
Okay.
go
So
ahead
Richard is
and
about to cook
Little
you. So
okay,
let's
putz.
see. What?
okay,
Why are you?
David.
Richard, I disagree heavily.
Hold on one second, please. Please make sure you respect the guest here.
I
So I
will.
will
I'm
give.
in the middle of a
Okay.
question. Thank you. Please step down. Richard, I highly disagree with you. I think that you are a self-hating Jew, just no different than Bernie Sanders.
Right.
But guess what? Here we are. So in all the time that I've been listening to you talk, I have heard attacks on Israel. I've heard your
You've heard historical
Just
material.
yeah,
Just
and
ask your
again,
question. Ask your
no.
question.
Let me finish my question.
do you
Thank you.
want
Without
him
any of
to? Okay,
host,
one
without
second.
any of your interruptions.
Well, please ask your
David, have some
question. We
respect.
don't
I'm
Have some
gonna
respect.
I'm
have the
gonna get to my
commentary.
question in a minute. I'll take as long as I need to.
Not
No,
if
you won't.
you're making it
Well,
impossible
Yeah,
for
I'm
other people
dropped.
to ask
Thank you.
questions.
Now
Let
here's
okay,
my
David.
excuse
question.
me,
Tag.
excuse me. Richard, would you like him? Because I know he did say some
No,
things
I'd
that
like
was
to hear his
disres.
question.
Okay,
But
My
go ahead,
without
question
David. Please,
commentary.
my
everybody else
question
mute.
is stop interrupting, man. My question is, so here we are. Where do we go from here so that we can live side by side in peace?
Excellent question. Okay, first of all, people who support what Israel is doing to the Palestinians, whether you call it genocide or not, tens of thousands of people are dead. Over 2,000 Israeli soldiers have confessed to deliberately murdering people. Almost the entire Israeli military, political, and religious establishment called for genocide. They may not have used the word genocide, but when you say, let's kill all of them, I think that's pretty self-explanatory, okay? When a Jewish person comes out and speaks against what his people are doing, it doesn't mean he's opposing Judaism or the Jewish religion or even Jewish people in general. I am not pro-Palestinian, and I am not anti-Israeli. I am pro-humanity, pro-human rights, and anti-oppression. If the roles of the Palestinians and Israelis were reversed, I would be doing exactly what I'm doing now. But if I was pro-Palestinian and the roles were reversed, I would be supporting genocide. I would be supporting the subjugation and murder of Jews. Okay? Number one. Number two, who do you think incites anti-Semitism? Do you think someone like me incites anti-Semitism because I call for equal rights for all people, because I call for the end of genocide, because I call for Israel to support and comply with what it promised it would comply with when it joined the UN in 1949, international law? Or do you think that well, let's put it this way. I won't ask you the question. Who do you think incites
Not answering the
anti-Semitism?
question.
Excuse me, let me finish. Real anti-Semites incite anti-Semitism. I think you would agree with that. And nobody incites anti-Semitism more than a group of people who kill people with the claim that they have the right to do it, with a group of people who claim that they are superior to any other people, with a group of people who thumb their nose at international law and think they have a right to steal another people's land, kill them, torture them, and throw them out of their own country. Nobody incites anti-Semitism as much as the state of Israel and its supporters. And then after inciting anti-Semitism, as you just proved, they claim that they're the victims of anti-Semitism. Wake up, read a book, start to examine your mind. There's nothing harmful in that. You won't die, but at least have the integrity to question what has been happening in the last 16 months. Okay? Notice that you are identifying with Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, Netanyahu, and all these others who want to kill the Palestinians. Literally.
Thank you,
No,
Richard.
You,
Okay,
Richard.
excuse me. You asked your question. We're gonna go. There's other people that want to come. Thank you, David. Okay. We'll go to Ahlam, and then we'll give a chance for everybody to ask a question.
If you need to drop me, Taz, to give somebody else an opportunity, because I did have the opportunity to ask questions, feel free. Okay,
Thank
just
you,
a heads up.
DJK. Okay. Go ahead, Ahlam.
Okay, so first, Richard, I just want to say huge thank you to you for being here, and an even bigger thank you for triggering the Zionists the way you are. I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you.
I was curious on your views. I heard how you were speaking about Hamas and about some members of Hamas. So I was just curious on your views of the IDF prior to waking up, and then after, which you've expressed how you feel after, but if you could just explain both.
Well, I thought, and again, I didn't really read this, but it comports with Israel's ideology. I thought prior to I had this transformation, this awakening in 2006, I thought the IDF and the Jewish soldiers were the most moral soldiers in the world. When they would kill a Palestinian, they had to do it. They regretted it, but they had to do it. That's what I actually thought. Okay, and that is the common theme. But it is not true. The Israeli army is not the most moral army in the world. Or, if you want to quote Ehud Barak during Operation Cast Lead, well, we're not as, I know what Milosevic did and Saddam Hussein. We're not like that. Okay, so, well, then maybe Milosevic and Saddam Hussein weren't as bad as Adolf Hitler, so you got to give them a pass, okay? But my point is that I bought into the entire Israeli pro-Zionist ideology, and most of it that I bought into, I created in my own mind. It just so happened that it's a collective logic that I shared with millions of Jews around the world, that we all come up with the same arguments because they make sense and they protect, preserve, and aggrandize our identity. But there's another point of view. If you can step outside of that identity, you can see things from a much broader perspective, which is what happened to me. Okay, and that perspective was my common humanity with all people, in which I didn't have an axe to grind. I didn't believe in one people. I didn't aggrandize one people and demean another people. I saw my common humanity with all people. We are all Israelis, Palestinians, Christians, Muslims, Americans, and Jews, all of us, whether we admit it or not.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Ahlam. We'll go next to General Prince.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for having me up. I just wanted to ask a question. Are you trying to change people's minds, and is it easier to change somebody's mind that's like older or younger? That's all I wanted to ask.
I am simply sharing my knowledge and my insight. I think my insight is very profound. I don't say that egotistically. I do claim to have discovered the root cause of this conflict, of any conflict, pretty much, and I've repeated it a couple times. Well, I would like people to at least take what I've said and consider it. And also, especially in the case of people who identify with Israel, to develop the integrity to question your beliefs. Read a book. I mean, the thing is, there's so many Israelis, prominent Israelis, who have come around and now admit that what Israel is doing is abominable. You know, I mean, it's, you know, but for some reason, because of this attachment to identity, this persistence, this tenacious attachment that is so hard to let go of, they can't even read a book, and they can't even admit that they can't read a book. My friends who support Israel, as I said earlier, not only have they never read a book, they can't admit they haven't read a book. They can't even admit that they don't know anything about the history. And they can't even admit that me, who they've known all their lives, who they know was always smarter than them, and that I've studied thousands of hours and written 2 books, they can't even admit that maybe I know something that they don't know. That's how ridiculous this whole thing is. It's unnecessary. If only people would, they don't have to wake up the way I woke up. That was pretty dramatic. But they could wake up to at least recognizing that maybe there's something I don't know. Maybe I could learn something if I read a book. And maybe if I read a book by a Jewish author, maybe I have a similar reality as that Jewish author. Oh, you know what? There's a lot of Jewish authors who now don't agree with what Israel is doing. They could all do that. It's not that hard.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you, General Prince. We'll go to Amani.
Yes. Hi, Richard. Nice to meet
Hi.
you. By the way, it's happy birthday.
Thank you.
I did look at one of your interviews, and something that stuck out to me was something that you said that you remembered at a synagogue when you were 10 or 11, and you heard people say stuff like, if a nuclear bomb is going to explode somewhere in the world, it's going to start in the Middle East. Thank God the Arabs are not united. They can never get it together, so that's why they're not able to destroy Israel. One, how did that make you feel to hear something like that at 10? And could you elaborate more on that?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, first of all, you know, when I was 10 years old or so, it was in the late 50s. So it wasn't that far since the end of the Holocaust, okay? And so the Jewish state was new. I was aware of anti-Semitism, and I knew, especially from reading from my classes in Sunday school where we read, you know, the Bible, the Torah, and the Tanakh, and I was familiar with with most of the stories about Israel's mortal enemies, the Philistines, the Amalekites, the Assyrians, et cetera, et cetera. So it made sense to me. But, you know, I was too young to really, I was just too young to really absorb the gravity of it, although I did think about it. And it did affect me probably for most of my life. And I pretty much for most of my life, if someone had said, well, where do you think a nuclear war will start? I would have said probably in the Middle East. And whether or not that was because of my knowledge, what little knowledge I had up till 2006, or because I was just remembering what I heard as a 10-year-old, I don't know. Okay? But that made sense. And it wasn't, and it was a very, back in the 50s, it was very common in the United States, not just among Jews, to hear that if there is going to be a nuclear war, it will probably be triggered in the Middle East. Because in the 1950s, the United States and Russia were testing their nuclear weapons in, you know, like in reality, either underground or at remote locations on Earth. Okay, so it was something that was very present in people's minds, nuclear war.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Amani. That was a very good question. We will go up to NYC Joe. He is a Zionist Israeli. Go ahead. Please keep it
Yes, I'm
respectful.
yeah, of course. Happy birthday, first of all.
Thank you.
Richard. So we I mean, I heard you, and I heard you from the beginning. To say, self-hating Jew, etc., etc. I mean, I'm not gonna say it. Probably you heard it many, many times. But here's the bottom line: it's not an Israel-Palestine situation anymore. It was never Israel against Palestinian or Israelis against Palestinians. It's a religious war, and it didn't start in 1948 nor in 1921 or the 1800s. It started back in the day when Muhammad came to the Jewish villages and told them that he's the new prophet, and they didn't want to, they rejected him. Let's just put it that way. It started from the 6th century, and I don't see it ever ending. Now, another thing that you said is if you
Wait,
would,
what's your
you always
question?
keep
Yeah, could
repeating
you
it.
ask your question?
Yeah, what's
Yeah,
your
yeah, yeah,
question?
and you always keep repeating it.
Hello.
Is if you would wait, let me finish. I'm about to ask. If you were born in a Saudi Arabia family, you would be Muslim, etc. But even if you were born in a Saudi Arabia family, you would still hate the Jew. And I just want to ask you in general, do you have any knowledge about the Islam and what the religious is? The religion, I'm sorry. And did you ever talk to scholars
A little bit.
about what Islam
Yeah,
is all
let me answer
about?
your question. Okay, first of all, there's different streams of Islam, as I'm sure you know. There's a Sufi stream, which is the more mystical stream, and then there are streams like Al Qaeda and ISIS, which are similar to Mayor Kahani's philosophy, Ben Gvir, Smotrich, Netanyahu, even though Netanyahu isn't
Not
religious.
really. I'm a
Okay, let me
Kahanist,
finish. Let
and
me
no,
finish.
you're
I
wrong.
want to answer your
But
question. May I answer your question,
go ahead.
please? First of
Yeah,
all, it
yeah,
did
but I'm
not
a
start.
Kahanist, so you're wrong. We don't
Excuse
have the
me.
same ideologies,
Excuse me.
respectfully.
Okay, you're trying to find phony issues to try to demean me rather than having the integrity to question your beliefs. It did not start in the 7th, you said 6th century. I think you meant 7th century. It did not start when Muhammad showed up. But I will say, okay, that according to genetic studies and according to a study that David Ben-Gurion and Yitzhak Ben-Zvi did in the 1920s, and Yitzhak Ben-Zvi was an anthropologist and the second president of Israel, they did a study and they concluded that 80% of West Bank Palestinians were Jews who converted to Islam. Okay? That study was not repeated, but a genetic study many, many years later came up with a very similar percentage. Number one. But number two, you are using the argument of tribalism. I am saying that we all share a common humanity. I don't care about the biblical history of the Jew. I mean, the biblical history of the Jewish people can be read as an allegory. You can read it any you want, but I'm more interested in the present. I'm more interested in people waking up to their true nature. And what you're doing is you're invoking the primitive ideology of tribalism. And I'm saying that tribalism is the greatest threat to the world because it's an us against them ideology or theology. And what it does is it pits people against other people and gets one people to say I'm superior to another people. And when you have that disposition, you always have to find an enemy as a scapegoat, just as the Nazis did with the Jews, as the Jews have done with the Palestinians. And it is not a religious war, okay? There is religion affiliated with what is happening, but it is not, it is a psycho-spiritual problem. Before it is territorial, religious, ideological, cultural, it is psycho-spiritual. It's a problem of the mind, and it's a problem of identity. That's what I mean by spiritual, the attachment to a presumed, limited, and mortal identity. And if you would contemplate, you're smart, if you would contemplate that definition, along with some of the other definitions I gave, such as the real enemy, you might start relieving yourself of your enemy images and your false beliefs that are conditioned within you. You need to question them.
Mm. Well, he dropped, but
They always
we
drop.
say we
Cowards.
say W Richard, so please in the comments, W Richard. I mean, absolutely the answers. We have over 550 people watching here. So thank you, Richard, what you are saying. And I think hopefully it'll change something in their minds. Let me go next to Celine.
Hello. First of all, hi Taz. Hello, Richard. Nice to, I guess, hear from you. I've never. It's my first time hearing of you, and I'm definitely going to look into that book of yours. I guess the first question that the question that I have is, essentially, I have been speaking to Zionists for a good 4 years on this app specifically, and I think I've been trying to do exactly what you're trying to do, and that is, convey the message of a common humanity and, through Palestine. And I always run into the same issue where when I come to, try to convey them the facts or the messages or the historical facts that we are all acquainted with and we all have the same access to, they immediately shut down and refuse it as true.
Right. Yes.
And I heard you make a statement, and you think that it's something that is more psychospiritual rather than maybe fact-based. My question is if we can't dismantle this thing through either facts or history or, just a basic understanding, right? And the main thing that I always like to convey is that Palestinians do want to live, in a region that is equal for everyone. It doesn't have any animosity of any race or religion. When I do convey that message, again, they seem to shut down. So if it's not through facts, what is the best way to achieve it? And I want to know more about that cycle.
I have the same experience with you. Look, if I can't convince people I've known since nursery school, if I can't convince my identical twin brother, why would I try to convince anyone who identifies as a Zionist or with Israel? I always tell people, look, talk to people who aren't sure what to believe, people who are on the fence. Okay, there's a lot of people like that, and I have had very good success with people like that. I have had a little bit of success with Zionists, but they're too afraid. They'll shut down. They'll hang up like these guys have done tonight. They're too afraid of the challenge to their identity. Okay, so you really spend your time with people who are who don't really know that much, who aren't identified real strongly with Israel. And don't worry about the Zionists. Maybe in time they'll either destroy the world or they'll see the light. Okay, but it's a matter. As I keep saying, it's a matter of identity. They are terrified. Maybe not on the surface. They're not aware of it consciously, but I guarantee you they are utterly terrified of the truth. Because if what you say is the truth, if Israel really is doing to the Palestinians what the Nazis did to the Jews, then what does that say about people who believe in Israel? If they see themselves as fair and humane and project that belief system and project those images of fairness and humaneness, which they do, onto Israel and see Israel as fair and humane, when you challenge that idea of fairness and humanity, they are going to feel totally threatened, because what you're really challenging is them, not Israel. Like I said in the beginning, all my life I defended Israel. All my life I thought I cared about Israel. When push came to shove and I realized what was really going on, when my mind opened up and I saw reality, I realized that I never gave a damn about Israel, and I never cared about Israel. I was defending my identity. I was defending my beliefs and images that were my precious beliefs and images that were a critical part of how I define myself, of how I conceive myself. And if Israel was the monster that some people said it was, then so was I, and I was not available to take that in. I could not accept that. So what had to happen was, by grace, that's the only thing I can say, by grace, because there's no explanation. It was an acausal event that happened to me. There was no cause. It did not happen in time. It happened outside of time, where there was no separate self to experience time or to have any experience, and there was no time during which an experience could take place. It's a mystery. But all I can say is that I encountered and got in touch with my prior condition, which is always the case for you, me, even Benjamin Netanyahu. Okay? That is the true condition of all of us. But most of us are so divorced from that condition, we create conflict. We identify as victims or some other, or various ideologies and religions, and then we take on the characteristics that we believe represent those identities, and we create the world we live in. If you're a victim, if you see yourself as a victim, then you're going to have to interpret what happens as attempting to victimize you, depending on the situation. In other words, if you see yourself as a victim and you have enemies, anything the so-called enemy does is meant to victimize you, okay, even if it's not true.
Yeah.
Okay, I hope that
Thank you.
gives you.
I really do appreciate that
Th-
answer, and it's interesting to
Thank
see
you.
how we both came to like very
Yeah.
similar conclusions.
Yeah, so don't waste your time with
Yeah,
Zionists.
yeah.
Talk to people on the fence.
I appreciate
Thank you.
that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Celine.
Thank you, Taz, and thank you, Richard, for your answer. And
You're welcome.
W panel.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me go to Z Justice and then we'll go to Zubaida. Go ahead, Z Justice.
Hey, Richard, thank you for your great speech here. So I just wanted
Oh,
to kind of
just real
understand,
quick. Yeah, Z Justice is also, I believe, Israeli Zionist, if I'm not mistaken. Go ahead.
right? So a very great work on spiritual thinking. It's very interesting how your spiritual book, contemplates spiritual transformation. And as if I understand correctly, this beautiful spiritual awareness that you achieve through change of identity, almost divine, so to say. So my question to you is, reading the book and obviously the spiritual transformation that you recommend, do you think if Ottomans would have some spiritual thinking and then identity, would they think that they would rethink about the jizya laws and age of marriage and age of 15? Or maybe if the age group supporters have some spiritual thinking and they would open a book and would read about spiritual transformation, could they perhaps maybe when they came to Israel cut less civilians or maybe not unalive Bibas families or have humanity in them? So do you think this spiritual divine identity could help Palestinians
Everybody.
from actually help them to become from a thirsty, bloodthirsty,
Okay, that's
population
not,
to
yeah, that's not how
Well,
we
it's
are.
the
actually, would
Excuse
that
me.
help
Israelis that
them?
are bloodthirsty, actually.
Would you
If you
think, but you
read,
just supported.
Excuse me. He just said
let me
Israeli. I
answer your
think you're gonna let
question.
he wants
First
to
of
answer.
all, let me answer your question. First of all, what I'm saying applies to every human being on earth without prejudice. Okay, I'm not favoring one group at the expense of another. But when you start talking about Palestinians as bloodthirsty, you are proving my point. You are repeating what you have been conditioned to believe and what your internal logic, the collective internal logic of people who see themselves as victims, you are repeating that logic. Why don't you read a book and look at the history? I'm telling you, my books are extremely well documented and they cover just about every argument that you have ever heard between Israel and the Palestinians. Read a book, okay? The Palestinian people, I know a lot of them, okay? They want to live in peace. If they were anti-Semitic, they wouldn't like me. They wouldn't accept me, okay? And if you read the book, you will see that from its very beginning, David Ben-Gurion, Yigal Allon, Israel's most prominent general in 1948, numerous Israelis, chiefs of staff, prime ministers have all called for the murder of Palestinians. Ben-Gurion and Allon used to say that we can't differentiate between soldiers and civilians. We have to target women and children. They would say things like, destroy a house, nothing. Destroy a neighborhood, now you're making an impression. And this has been going on since before 1948. In fact, in the 1890s, Theodore Herzl called for spiriting the penniless from the area. In other words, getting rid of the Palestinians and starving them. In 1907, Ben-Gurion talked about starving them. Levi Eshkol, when he was prime minister in the 60s, talked about starving them and getting rid of them. Okay? And then there's numerous examples of blatant murder that Shin Bet, Mossad heads, the chiefs of staff had admitted to. Mordecai Ger was one of the chiefs of staff, and he said that Israel has always consciously and purposely targeted civilians. Raphael Eitan, the longest-serving chief of staff in Israeli history, the chief of staff when Israel allowed the phalangists to go into the Sabra and Shatila refugee camps and slaughter old men, women, and children. There were no militants. They'd already left. under a treaty that was signed, okay? But Raphael Tan, who was considered very right-wing, who was promoted after the Suez War in 1956, when he had his soldiers murder 150 Egyptian POWs, which earned him a promotion. Raphael Tan, who said, for every incident of stone throwing, we should build another settlement, and the Palestinians are nothing but cockroaches in a bottle. He said, I don't believe in peace, because if they had done to us what we did to them, we would never make peace. So study the history. You have the ability to study the history, and if you do, I promise you, you will start developing a saner, more spiritual, more common humanity perspective than you have now.
Yeah, he actually, I don't know, he dropped, so he he left as well. Wow, Richard, I don't know, like some people in the comments, Michael, you're saying that you're smarter. It's for what I see, everybody's dropping. I'm not dropping anybody; they're leaving by themselves. We'll go to Zubaida. Go ahead, Zubaida.
Assalamu alaikum, sis. Hi, Richard. Really interesting listening to you. I'm calling you from the UK. So I don't know if you've realized a pattern here. There's been at least two individuals that have come on here and invoked Islam and propagated anti-Islamic propaganda. And I've noticed that this has become a common theme in the last, at least 50 years amongst Zionists, of creating this bogeyman out of Muslims and Islam. And when I personally analyze the history, I feel like the relationship between Jews, Muslims, Arabs have been mostly of coexistence and mutual respect. We have a common ancestor. Even if we analyze scriptures, they're pretty much similar. And I find it so ironic that they've now created this bogeyman out of Muslims. And throughout my research, I've realized that there's been many prolific Zionists and Zionist organizations, like the David Horowitz organization, like Daniel Pipes, who've used their privilege and their influence to push this anti-Muslim propaganda. I mean, here in the UK, we have anti-Muslim far-right groups who are literally funded by Zionists, and that really baffles me, considering anti-Semitism and how anti-Semitism was propagated through fear-mongering, through media. So my question was a kind of two-part question. To what extent are Zionists complicit in pushing anti-Muslim hate? And what changed from them seeking refuge in our lands to now equivalating us to the Yazidis?
Anybody will do anything to protect their presumed limited and mortal identity, okay? They have to
Richard, I got a question for you.
Excuse me, let me finish. They have to justify their identity. They need a bogeyman. They need to, in order to remain victims of a world that hates Jews, they have to almost create within their own minds a perpetrator, an enemy, okay? Yes, there are some Muslims who hate Jews. Yes, there are a lot of people in the world who hate Jews. Anti-Semitism is real, but it's not as big, especially in the United States, as Islamophobia and anti-Palestinianism, and that is all promoted by the AIPACs, the Jonathan Greenblatt and ADLs of the world, all these organizations that refuse to study the history. Now, I want to give you one example. Many people have heard of Sam Harris. Sam Harris has over 1 million podcast members who listen to his podcasts. I wrote to him more than 10 years ago and criticized him for some comments he made about Palestinians. In November of 2023, I think it was, and I did a YouTube talk about Sam Harris. In November of 2023, someone sent me a transcript of his podcast, and he was saying the same exact things in 2023 that he'd been saying like 9-10 years earlier. In other words, he didn't have the integrity. He has influence over 1 million people. He didn't have the integrity to question his beliefs. And he's not Jewish. Well, yes, actually, I think he is Jewish. But he didn't have the integrity to question his beliefs. And he promotes himself as this great thinker and this kind of philosopher, an open-minded guy. And he's a total fraud, in my opinion. But I have with my friend Yvette, who's Palestinian, we did a YouTube video on Sam Harris where we debunked the ridiculous thing he was saying. Anyway, I kind of lost track of your question because it was pretty long, but the main thing is, according to the Torah, if you read the stories in the Torah, the other people besides Jews in the Middle East, the Babylonians, the Syrians, the Egyptians, on and on and on, the Philistines, the Amalekites, they're all enemies of the Jews, right? So people, on the basis of what they've learned in Sunday school or in the yeshiva, they can manufacture an entire narrative that could be a complete fiction in their own minds that they take as real, and use that, overlay that onto what is actually happening in the world, and then generalize it onto all Muslims or all Palestinians or all Arabs. Okay? It's sick. It's sick, and they refuse to listen, like these people who keep hanging up. The minute you challenge their beliefs and prove that what they're saying is absurd, they hang up on you, and they call you a self-hating Jew or anti-Semite or whatever. Okay? I don't know if that answered your question, but...
Yeah, no, thank you very much. That makes a
You're
lot of
welcome.
sense. W Taz, I'll drop down.
Thank you. Thank you, Zubaida. Thank you, Richard. We'll go next to AK Fishing. I don't know really AK Fishing's stance or views, so if you can just let us know and then ask your question.
Yeah, hi, I'm pro-Palestine. What's up? Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
So I have a question. There's a lot of Jews on this app, right, that don't realize, they don't correlate, and they don't see from the past that the Holocaust happened, and what's going on now is like very, very similar to the Holocaust. And they're denying it and saying it's not true. But if someone denies the Holocaust, they're anti-Semitic, they're this, they're that. Like, what do you think, when do you think these people will wake up and realize what they're doing is wrong?
I'm not optimistic. I'm rather pessimistic. These people are so closed-minded, and I explain why. Because the attachment to an identity, is the strongest attachment we have to a pretty large extent. And I forget what you said in the beginning, but I'm just not hopeful. Okay, most people are going to stay really attached to their identity. For some reason, there are some people like me and some of the other people here who have somehow been able to challenge their identity in a subtle way. I didn't really know that I was challenging my identity. I just thought, well, it wouldn't hurt to learn a little bit more. And I was secretly hoping that what I would learn would simply validate what I already believed. Okay? I didn't think that I was going to find out what I found out. I certainly had no idea that what was going to happen was that I was going to lose a presumed Jewish identity, which again is a myth, even though I have great appreciation for Jewish culture and there is wisdom in the Jewish religion, but I had no idea that I would get in touch with my true nature. Okay? If I didn't answer your question, ask it again briefly. I'm getting old and I can't remember things that long.
No, it sums up the question, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, AK. And then we're gonna just keep everybody here on the panel. I'm not gonna be bringing anybody up so we can wrap this up. So we'll have about 4 more questions. And I know there's so many people that want to come up, but because we've already been here for 2 hours and I know there's a lot of information. So thank you, Richard, and thank you everybody for being with us. We'll go up to CA Lawyer.
Hi, Richard. It's nice to talk to you.
Thank you.
It's a very short 2-part question, but it's about the insight into the Jewish mindset from your perspective. First part is, I know a lot of Jews here in California, friends and colleagues. I find them to be very empathetic people for the most part. I still am having a hard time wrapping my head around how you go from that or being almost sociopathic in the way that they address, Arabs in the Middle East. And then the second part is just simply, what do you think, how far are we from a tipping point in the Jewish community to start to become more awakened, as you say?
Those are good questions. First of all, repeat your first question again.
Why do you think that there's such a sociopathology within the Jewish community?
Okay. It's interesting. Most Jews I know, just like the Jews you're describing, are empathetic and believe in freedom and equality for most people. But when it comes to Palestinians, they don't see them as human. They superimpose images of Nazis onto the Palestinians, okay? And then they see the Palestinians as wanting to do to Jews what Hitler didn't quite finish doing to Jews, Okay, so they don't see Palestinians as human beings. Okay, they are a threat. They are a mortal threat, and they will do, and anybody will do anything they can to erase a mortal threat to their existence. Okay, that's why this is happening. Yeah, most of my friends who support Israel, even the ones who don't think Israel's committing genocide and they support it, they want Israel to continue doing it, in most cases, they're humane people. But when it comes to the challenge to their identity, they cannot see what is going on and they support genocide. And they still, as I said earlier, refuse to educate themselves. They'd rather support genocide than taking an hour or two to start and start reading a book that might start unraveling their belief system. Okay, so it is an existential problem we are facing. That's why it is so difficult. And it's also why I'm not very hopeful.
Thank you,
I'm
CA
sorry. The
lawyer.
second
Yeah.
question, second part, I'm sorry, but was just how far do you think we are from a tipping point, if at all? You may have already answered that.
I think, you know, for all the time I've been involved in this issue, since 2006, up until maybe a few years ago, people were always saying how eventually freedom would win out, the Palestinians would get their freedom, and I never believed that. I kept seeing things getting worse and worse and worse for the Palestinians. I kept seeing Israel move farther and farther to the right, and now they are led. Netanyahu was always a Jewish supremacist. I always detested him, even in the 90s when I was still pro-Israel. But now they are so far to the right that something's got to give, okay? But I don't necessarily see that something good will come out of something bad, okay? Not as long as Israel continues to, and the United States, continue to believe in Zionism. And when I use the term Zionism, I know a lot of Israelis will tell you Zionism was done in 1948 when Israel established a state. But I'm using the term Zionism simply to mean the belief in a Jewish state and the belief that the Jews have a right to the land, even though they have ethnically cleansed many Palestinians and stolen the land. Okay, and to hell with the ridiculous arguments that, well, the Jews were there 3,000 years ago. Those are ridiculous. That's just tribal. That's just primitive tribal thinking, and it has no place in reality. And international law does not support justifying the theft of land on the basis of the Torah. By the way, most of the stories in the Torah and the Old Testament have been disproven anyway.
Richard, you're a
Thank you.
hero. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, CA lawyer. Thank you. We'll go to Ramona. And just for everybody, please make sure to check out Richard's book. It's called Wake Up and Reclaim Your Humanity. It is available on Amazon. So please make sure to check that out if you did enjoy this live. Again, we have over 500 people here. So thank you guys all for being here. Go ahead, Ramona.
Yeah, thank you for being here, Richard, and happy birthday.
Thank you.
I'm a Palestinian from Gaza, and I don't mean for this question to be like a little long-winded, but I was listening this whole time, and I see Zionists coming up, and from talking to them for a long time now, for over a year on this app, I noticed that whenever we talk about our Nakba, they bring up the Holocaust. Whenever we say there's a genocide in Gaza, they get offended, right? Because it apparently somehow dilutes the Jewish experience, because it feels like it seems like the standard for what a genocide is in the eyes of the Zionists is what the Holocaust is, and anything after that is a lesser experience.
Right.
I do hesitate whenever I bring this up in front of Jewish people or any people. But Guy Fawkes earlier said that Jewish people are the most persecuted people throughout history. And while I respect like their experience and I respect their pain, I feel like there is a sense of Jewish exceptionalism here. Indigenous people, Myanmar Muslims, Tutsis, Palestinians, Armenians, and 6 million other people were also slaughtered in the Holocaust. And I guess my question would be, as a Jewish man, do you see something inherently wrong with me saying, no, pain is not unique to Jewish people and genocide is not unique to Jewish people, and
I agree with you.
The standard, it is not the Holocaust is not the standard, that, and everything else compared to it is not a lesser.
Well, I agree with you,
lesser
but let me
thing.
just say, if the Jews are the most persecuted people in history, why the hell would they want to persecute anybody else? If the Jews experienced the Holocaust, why would they perpetrate a Holocaust on anyone else? And the reason is because they've been trained many from birth, and certainly the Israeli education system and the leaders of Israel, and the vile language that the Israeli leaders have used for so many years and so commonly, they've been trained to see Palestinians as subhuman. And if the Palestinians are subhuman, how can you can't commit a Holocaust on people who aren't human? I mean, they'll find any logic that justifies their inhumanity and their perpetration of a Holocaust on another people. Okay.
Just one last thing. I like I told you, I have been talking to a lot of these Zionists on the app, and I'll talk to them, and it's very personal to me because my parents do live in Gaza, and whenever, like, for example, I'm pretty sure you hear them deny the numbers. They'll say this is a Hamas-run health ministry. It's not 40,000. It's not 20,000 babies. It's 10,000.
You're making it
And
all up. They are
even though
actually making it up.
yeah, and I used to be a little nicer about this, but I have become a little more abrasive, and I will say, well, if you want a list, of the 40,000 Palestinians, have the same standard for yourself, right? And then they will call me anti-Semitic, right? Nobody else is held to that standard except for the Palestinians. Nobody asks the Ukrainians to pull up
In
a
order
list.
to delegitimize what you are saying, in order to deny what you are saying, they have to call you an anti-Semite. Because if you're an anti-Semite, then what you're saying is only meant to demean the Jewish people. It's not true. Okay? They're cowards. Okay? They are emotional and intellectual cowards who refuse to look at the history, and as I said earlier, would rather see an entire people be destroyed than read a book. Okay? And by the way, Israel has always accepted the Gaza Health Institute's statistics on deaths.
Yes,
And
that I
anyone with a
know.
sane mind, anybody should know, just looking at the photos, looking at the destruction that's going on, that it's got to be way over 440,000. Actually, the figure now that is probably over 70,000. But Ralph Nader, on one of his shows about a month or two ago, said that the U.S. State Department had come out with a figure, I believe it was over 200,000, but then they wouldn't publish it. And Ralph Nader said he was going to submit a Freedom of Information Act document to try to get that information. But anyway, by the time they clear up all the rubble and everything, I think it'll be at least over 100,000 dead. Not
Yes,
to mention hundreds of thousands orphaned, hundreds of thousands maimed for life, and millions traumatized.
Yes, and there was 17,000 orphans in Gaza before, and as the last point, I already know all these things. It's just that my abrasiveness and the way that I speak is not meant to hurt the Jewish people.
I know.
When somebody denies my numbers and my people's numbers, and I compare it to the Holocaust, since that's the standard they want to hold for what is genocide, and they get offended and call it anti-Semitic, I feel like I have the right to be offended as well, because I am also a human being, and we also have a genocide going on. And I'm glad you agree with me. Like, coming from a Jewish person, it means a lot. But that's all I
There are
want.
many other Jews who agree with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ramona. Thank you, Richard. We're just gonna have three more questions, and they are all from Zionist panelists. So we'll go to Isaac, then we'll go to Michael, and then Coach. Please keep it respectful, and then we'll wrap this up. Go ahead, Isaac.
Hello, Miss Richard. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
All right, so I got a few simple questions, right? So earlier you had mentioned that Netanyahu is a Jewish supremacist. So if he really is a Jewish supremacist, how come he invited Marco Rubio which, by the way, U.S. Secretary of State, who's both Latino and Christian, to his country.
Well, he's the Secretary of State. He represents Israel's greatest defender. Listen, I'm telling you, Netanyahu and his cabinet, they think of the Americans as friars. That's the Yiddish word for suckers. Marco Rubio doesn't know anything about the history of Israel-Palestine, and that is perfect for Netanyahu. Just like Biden didn't know anything, just like Trump doesn't know anything, and just like whatever Blinken knew, it didn't matter because Blinken identified with Israel. And so he wasn't going to base his advice to the president on the basis of reality. He was going to base it on his support for Israel, okay? Netanyahu is a Jewish supremacist. He has always, his whole life has been to get, to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians. He has called for years he has called Palestinians Amalekites. In Exodus, the Amalekites, a group of Amalekites, murdered some Jews in the desert. And God got angry and told Moses, you must destroy every single Amalekite, men, women, children, and their livestock. And then he didn't succeed. And then Saul, King Saul, in I think the book of Samuel, but anyway, King Saul did destroy all the Amalekites but one. He let the king live. And the king lived and had a child, and eventually Haman came from the race of Amalekites, and Haman wanted to kill all the Jews of Persia. Okay, but my point, and then he was stopped, of course, by Queen Esther and Mordecai. But my point is that this is part of Jewish culture, and Netanyahu, who probably is an atheist, but he uses what he needs to justify. I have heard friends of Netanyahu say that he sees himself as a Messiah. Now, they say that he sees himself as the Messiah in a good way. No, Netanyahu is a megalomaniac who's willing to sacrifice his own people to keep himself in power, and has always wanted to ethnically, whether you're a Zionist or not, you may even agree with this. But the fact is, he has always wanted to be seen as the Moshiach, as the modern day Moses, and he has always wanted to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians. He bragged about destroying the Oslo Accords. He has talked about beating Palestinians so hard that it becomes unbearable. He is a true enemy of humanity.
Okay, I'll look into that.
I knew in the 1990s, when I was still deluded, when I still embraced the lies of Israel, I knew in the 1990s that this guy was a sick megalomaniac and a pathological liar. I just thought he was an aberration and didn't really represent the Israeli government and the Israeli ideology. But I was wrong.
Okay,
Thank you.
one last thing. So,
Oh, wait, hold on. No,
oh,
I'm sorry. Sorry, I know, just because there's, is it quick?
yeah, it's quick. So, I've had some really concerns for the Middle East. And with H Group, they said that, quote unquote, freedom resistance fighters, it's going to get better with Palestine being one nation. But I've seen videos saying otherwise. And I really, after seeing those videos, I really do believe that if H Group takes over Palestine with one country, it won't just be Jewish hate, but it'll be all hate for those who don't.
There is too much hate going
belief
around.
in.
There's way too much hate going around. I ideally believe in a single state with Jews and Palestinians living in peace, but I think that's impractical because there's so much hate. And I do think that the hatred comes more from the Jewish side, okay? Because of what I have seen and what I read and because of the actions of people, okay? But in any case, it all comes down to identity. It comes down to somehow transcending our existential fear and confusion and letting it transform itself into compassion and clarity and recognize we are all one people.
You want me to show a couple of sources? Because I can do that
No,
right
Read
excuse
now.
my
me. We're
book.
not doing
I don't
sources.
have time to
Go.
do your research
We're
for
not
you.
here for a debate or sources.
Listen, you
Thank
got
you.
to, let me just finish. Wait, you've got to start thinking more clearly. You've got to consider the possibility that there are things you don't know and ideas you have not encountered. So read a book and contemplate some of the deeper things that, for example, I talk about. Contemplate them. They are universal. They are not confined to Palestinians or Israelis or anyone else. Okay? Try to find your common
Thank
humanity.
Thank you. And again, for people asking in the comments where to buy his book, it is on Amazon. It's called Wake Up and Reclaim Your Humanity. Okay, thank you, Isaac. We'll go to Michael Haas. Michael claims that he is smarter than you. So let's see. Go ahead, Michael.
Well, I made that comment when he said he was smarter than whomever he was speaking to.
I was talking about
And
my friends who you don't know.
okay, well, you're smarter than them. I learned as a child that old doesn't mean smart. Okay,
I never
um,
said that I was smarter
Excuse
because I'm
me.
older. What is your question?
I will get to it. Okay, Richard. I'll just list my questions. You can respond to some of them or all of them. I don't care.
No,
Have
no,
you?
just one, please. Just one question, just because for the
I
time.
just get one question. Really?
Why don't you ask the
Yes.
question? Let's see what happens.
Have you been to a kibbutz? Are you still welcome in Israel? Do you have any family members affected from the
As I
Holocaust?
said in the beginning,
And my
yes,
last
Okay.
question is,
yes.
you're still welcome in Israel.
I don't know if I'm welcome in Israel. I haven't gone there in a few years.
Okay. Will you come back in a few days and let us know how your book sales went? You plugged your book 49 times. I put a tick.
That's bullshit.
You plugged your
And I'm
book
not going to
49
give
Okay,
you
times on
an
excuse
this
me.
line.
analysis
Okay,
of book
sorry.
sales.
Excuse me.
And one last thing.
Your questions are so stupid. Don't you
It
have an
has your,
intelligent question?
yeah.
Well, let's hear it.
This spiritual awakening you've gone through has drawn you closer to people who love and support Hamas.
Oh,
Do you
God.
not see that as a bit problematic?
You've made that up in your own mind. You're making
No,
up
I've been
arguments in
listening
your
to
own
you.
mind as
That's
a
what
way
you
of
have said.
defending your presumed limited and mortal identity so that you don't have to question it. So you don't have to question your genocidal
No,
beliefs and your
it's.
hateful ideology.
Okay. Are you done with your questions, Michael?
I think it's the other way around, Richard. I think you've
Okay.
abandoned your
Okay, thank you very
morals.
much for
You've
your
abandoned your
denial and your
morals.
projection.
You've abandoned your
Okay,
moral.
thank you, Michael. Thank you. Okay. Um,
Idiot.
just coach, you're please keep it respectful because I will not allow anyone to disrespect the guest. Go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, and happy birthday, Richard. I first want to start off by just saying I've heard a few Holocaust comparisons, and I understand where you're coming from. But on a day where we found out that the Bebas children and family were brutally murdered by their captors, I want to point out that the Holocaust was not preceded by any group of any mass slaughter by Jews against the Germans. So to make that comparison is just unfathomable to me,
I don't
but
know
I'm
what
going to
you're
put that to
talking
the
about.
side
I
for a
didn't say
second.
anything about the
I'm
Beebus
going to put
children.
that
You're
to the
making
side for
that
a
up in
second.
your mind. If you
Thank you.
can't ask an intelligent question,
My
then
question
please
is
leave.
this.
Yeah.
If I can put aside my identity and get through that, at 14 years old, when I first set foot into Israel as a young man, I'm there for a wedding. I just celebrated my birthday, and a bus explodes with the bride and groom on it.
Oh, God.
How does any
I've explained all
American...
this before. I am not
I understand, but
saying.
I wasn't up here, so I'm asking you to explain it again. Just let me finish my question. How does any amount of removal of identity, whatever you want to call it,
Oh, God.
like existential, whatever, and I'm not just talking from the Jewish perspective, from the
Whatever.
Palestinian perspective too. Both peoples have gone through a ton of torment, trauma, and pain
I
over
understand
the
that. I've
last
explained all this.
80
What
years.
is your question?
My question
Okay, I'm gonna
is,
give you one chance,
how do
coach.
we
What is your
put that
question?
how do we put that all to the side and come to some reconciliation while having these very real lived experiences
What I'm
of
saying, and I've
witnessing
said it
death and
before, let me
destruction.
answer your question now, okay? What I'm saying is that if we get in touch with our common humanity with all people, we will start to respect all people and not see some people as inferior and other people as superior, okay? I've explained all that. Yes, I've explained that identity, and I said it was universal. I did not confine it to Jewish identity. I said our identity causes suffering in the world, and that people whose identity is threatened, no matter who they are, will do anything, bar nothing, to defend their identity. And some people react
I
with
understand
violence.
that.
But when you
But
talk about Palestinian violence, do you ever ask yourself the question, why did they do that? What provoked them? I'm not condoning their violence, but I'm saying maybe if Israel didn't torture them, kill their parents, kill their children, kill their spouses, kill their siblings, throw them in prison for years, maybe they wouldn't be so angry. There are always going to be a number of people who will act out their anger in very violent, even genocidal ways, and it is not confined to one people or any other people. Okay? It just so
Thank
happens
you.
that in this day and age, the Jewish state is in its attempt to steal the land and ethnically cleanse the people, which has always been the Zionist design, has chosen to totally violate international law and commit these crimes against humanity. That is the reality. And it doesn't mean that if Hamas or any other Palestinian does something equally bad, that I'm justifying that. I'm not. I'm doing the opposite. It's people who defend Israel and see Israel as different or Jews as different than Palestinians who are perpetrating all this prejudice in the world and are the source of genocide.
the most
Thank
disingenuous
you.
thing
Oh,
you just said,
excuse me.
You
Hold
don't
on.
know what
Just,
you're
just
talking about,
coach,
Michael, or
coach.
whatever your name is. Why
Excuse
you
me.
don't you
just had
study the
His
an
name.
history
Israel
and
supporter
I
stop
can't
talking.
being
mute
so
him. Can
ignorant?
thank you, thank you, coach.
No, I'm trying to meet you in the middle.
No, no, coach, this is not a debate. You asked your question. I think this will wrap up the Q&A session. I just wanted to have one thing, if my own question. I wanted to wrap it up with this. If you could have one message reach the entire world about this issue, what would it be?
It would be to recognize that we all share this planet, that we share a common humanity, that even our religions, those of us who embrace a religion, whether it's Judaism, Christianity, Islam, even at the heart of our religions, at least many of the interpretations, we do share a common humanity. The whole purpose of religion is to bring us closer to our divine condition. And our divine condition is compassion and clarity, not existential fear and confusion, which leads to violence always. Okay? So wake up, reclaim your humanity. And you can't do, in general, it's not something that you can just suddenly do, but contemplate, as I've said before, contemplate some of the deeper things I've talked about and have the courage to study the history, not the history as promoted by Benjamin Netanyahu or others who are extraordinarily one-sided. Read my book. You may not think that I'm neutral. Okay, you may think that I'm very one-sided, but read my book and look at the arguments I make. Okay, when I address the history, I am clarifying it using mostly Israeli sources, and the history that I am clarifying are many of the arguments, most of the arguments that the Jewish side, that the Israeli side has promoted for generations, that have caused so many people to lose their humanity and believe that Palestinians are a unique species of monsters who want to kill Jews, when it is actually a projection. It is the people like Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, and others, Israel Katz, that actually want to destroy the Palestinians. And that has been the goal for generations, actually, just not as viciously as it is today.
Thank you, Richard. I just wanted to let you know the Zionists and the Israelis on this app and the people that have come up are triggered by everything they've heard. The ones that have come up and asked questions and dropped are going around like we call it crashing out, where they're just spiraling out of control. There is a lot of them that are in the request that do want to come up. Would you like to take one more question?
All right. If it's a question
Okay.
and not a speech.
Okay, we'll do one more question. I'm just going to bring up one other person, so I do have to just drop somebody real quick. I'll bring you guys right back up for just give me 1 second. One question, please keep it respectful. Go ahead, PG.
Hi, how are you, Richard?
Hi.
How are you, Taz? What's going on? I do have a question, though. You were talking about reconciliation and humanization with the Palestinians. Honestly, me as a Zionist, when I came into this app, I particularly wanted peace. But how do we, and you as a person that have been there, how do we reconciliate with the people that have actually taken hostages? For instance, today, the Vivas family, Hamas, said that they are unalive, and those people were taken by civilians. They weren't taken by
Okay,
Hamas.
let me answer your question. I know there's a lot of horrors going on both sides. Israel has thousands of hostages it has taken.
There are
Israel,
no
let me
hostages, though.
finish. One thing I would recommend, and it's amazing that Zionists even reject this. I would recommend that Israel comply with international law. When Israel joined the United Nations in 1949, it promised to comply with all UN resolutions, past, present, and future. It has violated just about every single UN resolution that had anything to do with Israel. Okay? Israel has tried to destroy, literally, consciously, deliberately tried to destroy international law for years, which is one of the reasons why it doesn't refer to occupied territory as occupied. It refers to it as disputed. And fortunately for Israel, you could say, for the dark side, Israel had Joe Biden that has helped Israel, and now they got Trump, who is helping Israel violate international law. Why can't you embrace international law? What is the point of international
It's not
law?
about.
International
Excuse
humanitarian
me, let
law,
him finish.
meant to maintain a degree of civility between nations. Okay? Why don't you admit to yourself that you oppose international law because you are siding with Israel and you're picking out atrocities, which are atrocities, I agree with you, as if they only exist coming from the Palestinians, when in fact Israel has killed one child every 2 days for the last 25 years. Okay, probably more than that if you consider when you add up everybody, all the children it's killed in Gaza in the last 16 months. All I'm saying is have the integrity to do some real research instead of just believing the garbage that you've been fed. Israel has made sure to destroy the humanity in its citizens, to get them to be supremacists. That's what it's doing. Look at its leadership. What do you think they represent? My God, wake up.
Thank you.
May I
Thank
answer
you.
now?
Thank you. No, this is not a
Can I
debate.
answer
This is
just now?
no.
No,
This
I just want to know. It's just a curious question, Taz, because he's telling me that there are hostages in Israel, which they're not. Should we
What
mention
do you
Marwan
think the
Barghouti? Should I
thousands
bring names of the people that are
Palestinians,
actually prisoners because
Israel,
they committed
excuse me,
the
hold on,
attacks?
PG,
I'm
you're
sorry,
crashing
sir.
out,
They're not
PG. Oh my God,
you're
hostages.
totally
PG.
deluded. You don't know what you're talking about. You haven't read the
Deloaded.
history.
Marwan Barghouti
Israel has been taking hostages. You call them prisoners. I call them hostages
is
because they don't
Marwan
even
Barghouti.
get charged with a crime.
Okay, thank you, PG. Thank you very much. I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up here. I'm gonna have to drop you. Thank you so much, Richard.
You're
Please,
welcome.
please, everyone support Richard. Purchase his book, Wake Up and Reclaim Your Humanity. It is available on Amazon. Please make sure you guys support him. And for everybody, I hope many people have listened. We had over just about 600 people, live viewers in this room listening. And I know that there are people that will have their minds changed, will wake up. And
I hope so.
thank you again
Can
so
I
much,
just say
Richard.
can I say one last thing?
Absolutely.
We have seen all these Zionists on here. They're proving my point. Okay, they refuse to listen, and then they come up with anybody can come up with an isolated argument here or there of atrocities by one side or the other. But this lady who was just talking, she can't even acknowledge that the thousands of people that Israel has thrown in prisons, a lot of them are thrown in prisons so that when they do a hostage deal, they can exchange these innocent Palestinians for Israelis. And they throw Palestinians in prison for administrative detention with no charge. They can renew the administrative detention every 6 months for decades. If you're a student at Birzeit University, a university in occupied territory, if you want to form a Hebrew language club or a club that studies the history of the Jewish people, they can throw you in jail because you're not allowed to have a club. Of course, you can have a club if you go to Hebrew University. You can have many clubs. But, I mean, they throw people in prison for posting on Facebook that they believe in equal
Yep.
rights for all people. So these
Absolutely.
Zionists are insane. They don't listen.
That's
Taz, if
100% correct.
if
Thank
I
you
may
so
just say
much.
something, Tim, just real quick, I wanted to thank you for coming. I want to thank you for your honesty. It took a lot of courage to be here and to actually ask to speak to these Zionists. Happy birthday once again.
Thank
And if
you.
the
Yes,
Israelis
happy
don't
birthday.
welcome you in occupied Palestine, just know that the Palestinians welcome you with open arms. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Linda. Thank you. Again, happy birthday, Richard.
Thank
So
you.
honored to have you with us and spending your birthday with us. Thank you again. And please, please support him, his book. I will I'll have it on the big screen. And thank you guys again. Thank you, Richard. Have a
Thanks,
wonderful
guys.
night.
Goodbye,
Take care.
everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Oh my God.
Yo, that was the
That
best
was
Love you.
beautiful, Taz.
live
That
So
was
did
awesome.
on
Taz.
TikTok ever.